It was a hectic morning in the Willis household. Cassandra, the owner of the house, was setting the table and getting ready for her shift. She worked as a paramedic in an ambulance. Her husband Harold was running around the house and getting ready for another business trip. He owned a chain of fast food joints. The branches were in different cities, so he was often on the road. "Honey, is the bag ready? Where's my shirt? And my briefcase with my documents? I don't want to forget anything," the man fussed. "Honey, everything is ready. The shirt is in the wardrobe and the bag is in the corridor, and the briefcase is on the bedside table. Well, when has it ever happened that I've missed or forgotten something? Let's get breakfast before the omelet gets cold. I even made cheesecakes. Eat while it's warm. Do you want a sandwich wrapped up with you?" Cassandra asked. Harold ate with gusto. It was all very tasty. "Cassandra, don't be ridiculous. Have you forgotten that I can get lunch or a snack at any of my cafes? So you can keep it. And anyway, when are you going to give up your hard work, traveling around the city, saving lives, putting up with nasty grannies and their constant complaints? And all for a pittance. You can't even buy brand-name things with it. And it's impossible to live like that. Let me get you into a private clinic. I have the right connections. At least there are decent salaries. Or come to me as a manager." The woman sighed. Her husband repeated this conversation not for the first time, and she always answered the same thing. "But you know I can't treat for money. To prescribe people unnecessary analyses and unnecessary drugs. It's wrong, and in private clinics it's a common thing. My calling is to help people, and grandmothers are not harmful at all. They're just sick. And life is very hard these days. You have to find an approach to them. My grandmother and mom have been in this profession all their lives, and I've dreamed of being a paramedic since I was a kid. But business is not my thing. I don't have the entrepreneurial spirit," Cassandra sighed. Harold took a sip of flavored coffee, took a bite of cheesecake, and said, "It's boring, Cassandra. And don't you get bored with this routine? The same thing every day, 3 generations in a row. I can't do that. I need variety all the time, new emotions, new experiences. But your cooking is excellent." "Thank you." The woman looked into her lover's eyes. He seemed to be in a good mood, and she dared to start talking about the pressing issues again. "Honey, you just don't swear. I wanted to ask again. Let's take a baby from the orphanage. We miss the laughter of children in the house. I suffer so much without children. You can take a baby and raise it as your own." The spouse's mood immediately faded. He flared up, threw the spoon with a clatter on the floor, and said angrily, "We've discussed this 100 times. I am absolutely against it. Why would I want another man's child in the house? I'll never love him. We don't know what kind of blood flows in it, and then he'll grow up to be a criminal. And we'll have a lot of trouble. And anyway, I'm on the road. You're on shift too. We don't have time to raise our own. Let's finish this unpleasant conversation. I have to go." Cassandra was offended. Tears came to her eyes. She almost screamed. "So what does your logic say? We're never going to have children at all. What kind of family is that then?" Harold softened, touched her nose lightly, and said, "A beautiful family. I love you and you love me. And that's enough for me. That's it. I'm off and running. Don't miss me. I'll be back in a week." Cassandra hurried to the bus. She had a heavy shift ahead of her, but strangely enough, she wasn't worried about it at all. On the contrary, she had the moral satisfaction of helping people and doing something useful. All the women in her family had been paramedics, and all the subtleties of the profession had been passed down from generation to generation. So Cassandra, listening to her grandmother and mother's conversations from childhood, already by the age of 12 knew exactly the symptoms of heart attack and stroke and could easily render first aid. At least she had practiced enough on her friends and relatives. She deftly applied bandages, gave injections and bandages. Naturally, she never dreamed of another profession. Her mom had prepared her for medicine, so she got into college without any problems and was the best in the course. From her earliest childhood, Cassandra desperately lacked her father's love. She wanted so much for her daddy to praise her, to admire her, to care for her. Perhaps it was for this reason that she didn't like her classmates at all. She always ignored their inept attempts at attention and thought they were not serious. Sometimes, of course, she went with her girlfriends to a youth group, but she was very bored and uninterested there. Jokes, and everyone sits in his cool phone, only do that they take pictures of everything in a row and shout. The girls were friends with Cassandra, but they thought she was boring and unattractive. They thought she thought too much of herself, waiting for a prince. And so it turned out that the diploma was coming soon, but Cassandra still had no permanent beau. Though outwardly the girl was very attractive, slender figure, thick black hair and brown eyes. Many boys called her Gulchatai because of her resemblance to an oriental beauty. During breaks, she liked to go with her friends to have a snack in the same cozy cafe. They invariably ordered fragrant coffee and dessert, tiramisu, chatting about everything in the world. It was there that I met Harold. He still owned only one cafe at that time. One day the waiter brought a huge chocolate cake, coffee and a note to their table. I looked into her brown eyes, saw her reflection in them, and realized it was impossible not to love her. "What's your name, beautiful?" The girls gasped and immediately looked at Cassandra, who was blushing. Of the three of them, she was the only one who was a searing brunette. She looked round and saw a stately young man standing near the bar. He was burning her with his gaze and smiling confidently. She had never been introduced to him in such a romantic and mature way. Her friends understood and hurried away, giggling softly. Cassandra and Harold were left alone at the table. He said something, joked and looked at her so tenderly, and the girl realized that she had fallen in love. This imposing, well-groomed man seemed to be the very prince, mature, confident, reliable, which she had dreamed of since childhood. She listened to him, holding her breath, and watched him enchanted, completely submitting to his energy. That was how their romance spun. How beautifully Harold courted. He did not skimp on bouquets and gifts, once even ordered a boat trip on the river. The man was very flattered that such a beautiful and young girl, obviously unsophisticated in love, and from a decent family, so much in love with him. He too was sincerely in love. He wanted to open the whole world for her, to teach her everything he knew, and of course to possess her. But Cassandra was in no hurry to do the latter. She was a medical doctor herself and knew very well how an affair outside of marriage could end. Therefore, she stood firmly on the fact that all the comforts only after the wedding. This made the man a little angry. What kind of nonsense in this day and age? But at the same time very much turned him on this game hunt, and in the finale should be the coveted prize. If a man wished he could use the services of any girl, they would hang around his neck. But it was not so interesting now, and he tolerated it. All girlfriends frankly envied the girl. How could it be? An aspiring businessman, young, handsome, one could only dream of such a groom. Then, as it should be, there was an acquaintance with parents. Surprisingly, Harold's parents accepted the naive and chaste bride very well. They saw a girl brought up from a decent family, her profession is serious. "Well done, Harold, for choosing Cassandra," his mother encouraged her son. "She'll make a good wife. You'll be able to mold her to suit you. You can see she's crazy about you. I'm happy for you guys. The main thing, take care of her and do not hurt her," said Harold's mother. After meeting the bride's family, though, the mom started feeling sorry for her daughter for some reason. "Oh, Cassandra, it will be hard for you with Harold. He's very bossy, very narcissistic. He sat there like a king, and you were all over him. And this and that. You'll either have to obey him, or it won't work out." Think well, can you live your whole life like that? Cassandra didn't pay much attention to her mother's words then. She was so in love. She saw the future as happy. She couldn't see it any other way. On the contrary, she liked the fact that Harold was in charge of everything, making all the decisions. He was her fiancé, father, and teacher in one person. And she, as a diligent student and a good daughter, wanted to please him, to do everything right, to please him. Soon they had a lavish wedding. That day seemed to Cassandra the happiest. An expensive restaurant, lots of important guests. She invited all her girlfriends. They admired her flying boffin dress and beautiful veil. She seemed to herself a princess from a fairy tale. She was laughing and twirling in a waltz with her beloved, and it was so easy and good at heart. Mum was already retired and moved to live in her grandmother's house in the village. There you need to keep an eye on the farm and vegetable garden. It was a pity to leave everything after the death of my grandmother and left the young their family nest, a good spacious house in the bedroom district of the city. My grandfather had built it. High ceilings and rooms with arches. Very interesting design. Nowadays you can't find such things. The yard had a small flowered, a gazebo, and fruit trees that her grandmother had lovingly tended. Cassandra loved her home and refused to move into the stuffy one-bedroom in a skyscraper that her father-in-law had bought them for their wedding. Harold didn't mind at all. It was really spacious, with plenty of room to spread out. He, however, also invested a lot. He made a luxury renovation, equipped himself with an office. As a result, it turned out to be a modern mansion. Family life began. The first years, Cassandra was satisfied with everything. She tried her best to please her beloved. He was always at home waiting for a delicious meal. Cleanliness and order. And this despite the fact that the schedule on the ambulance was always frantic. At first, Harold saw it, appreciated it, praised it. The nights were hot. He whispered words of love and swore fidelity. The woman was at the pinnacle of bliss. Happiness marred only one thing. Cassandra could not get pregnant. The doctors did not find any abnormalities, but the years passed, and the result was nil. Harold flatly refused to be examined. He considered it even humiliating. He was sure that he was fine. And in general, he was not worried about the lack of children in the family, went headlong into business development. He often came home late, sometimes drunk. He demanded peace and quiet, ironed shirts and hearty meals, and he didn't want any children in the house. He couldn't stand their crying and shouting, their noise and fuss. Babies, even when he was a guest, did not please him at all, but rather irritated him. Now he had a chain of eateries, frequent business trips, a life of his own, separate from Cassandra's. Slowly they were drifting further and further apart. There was nothing to talk about. Harold hated talking about patients or her work. Cassandra listened sadly to his monologues about how much the supplier's products had gone up in price. The woman really wanted to be a mom. It literally hurt when she held a friend's baby or any patient's baby in her arms. She realized that if they did not have a child in their family, the relationship would soon come to nothing. There is such an expression, loneliness alone together. It reflected her inner state very accurately lately. But her husband, it seems, did not want to change anything. Everything suited him. He lived in comfort and prosperity with a beautiful and hard-working wife, but somehow not used to consider her opinion. It was an ordinary shift. He and the driver were on their way to another call. Anonymous reported that on the street Jefferson, the house of 6, bad little child. And that was it. How old is he? What's wrong with the kid? Nothing was known. It all sounded more like a stupid joke, especially since the caller sounded like a teenager. It happened sometimes too, but the team had to respond to the call. Cassandra got out of the car, looked around. It didn't look like anyone was there. Suddenly she heard a baby crying. She rushed to the bench, which was covered with snow, and gasped, There in a cradle lay a baby, a week old at most. He was already blue from the cold, screaming desperately. The paramedic grabbed the baby and immediately carried him to the car. "What on earth is going on, Cassandra?" exclaimed the driver. "How can you leave such a small child in the cold? This mother has no conscience at all. If you don't need the baby, take it to an orphanage. It won't die there. How can you just leave it in the cold like that? An animal wouldn't do that." Cassandra turned the baby round and examined it. There was no visible damage. The umbilical cord hadn't healed yet, which meant it wasn't more than a week old. The baby warmed up and quieted down, and when he felt himself in someone's warm arms, he closed his eyes. There was no note in the basket, nothing in the overalls. Only a bottle of formula was under his pillow. Cassandra warmed it in her hands, realizing that the baby must be very hungry. Something unimaginable was going through her mind. How sweet it is, how pretty, how small, how defenseless. He is looking with beady eyes, not understanding where Mummy has disappeared. You poor little thing. What kind of mummy left you? Why? She dressed you warmly outside, put you on formula. So she's not completely lost. But why is life so unfair? I'd give anything to be a mom. But some people don't want their own baby. What if we don't report it? Say it was a false alarm and take the little boy home to raise and love and be happy. No one would ever know. And Justin wouldn't give it away, he's his own man. Cassandra, on impulse, called her husband and whispered, "Harold, listen. We found an abandoned baby in the street. My love, let's take him to us, adopt him, I beg you. It's a boy. He's healthy and so unhappy." But her husband hissed angrily into the receiver. "Cassandra, are you out of your mind? I've told you 100 times. Don't you dare bring any foundlings into the house. What do you want to go to court for? You can do time for stealing children. I'm done talking. I don't have time. You'd better see a psychologist because you're starting to have obsessive-compulsive ideas." The chauffeur, who had known Cassandra for many years, overheard their unpleasant conversation and said quietly, "Cassandra, don't even think about it. We have to tell the dispatcher, take him to the hospital, and then the police will be called. I understand you perfectly well. I feel sorry for the boy myself, I can't stand it. But you can't do that. Maybe he has relatives, maybe his mom will come to her senses. Anything can happen. Don't take the sin on your soul. We'll proceed as instructed." Cassandra understood. The chauffeur was right. She cradled the baby in her arms, breathed in the unforgettable baby smell, wiped away a tear, and called the dispatcher herself. They handed the baby over to the hospital, gave a statement to the police, and drove on to more calls. But a heavy residue remained in Cassandra's soul. The urge to be a mum grew 100-fold. She began to have trouble sleeping at night and kept thinking, why is Harold so hard? Why does he only think about himself? Doesn't he see how badly I feel? Why not give an abandoned child from the orphanage a happy childhood? You can't live like this without children until you're old. What's the point of trying to earn money? For whom? For what? Cassandra was indeed sad and depressed. She even started taking sedatives. The only thing that saved her was her favorite job. Only there she forgot about all her personal problems and completely immersed herself in solving the problems of patients. And strangely enough, it became easier. And here was another call, a woman in labor. Contractions caught at home. Such, alas, was not uncommon. Young mothers often carelessly until the last do not go to the hospital. Outside there was a serious snowstorm. You could not see anything. The communal workers could not cope, and the roads in some places were not cleared at all, and the snow kept flying and flying, covering everything around with a white veil. They barely made their way to the country cottages. They were opened by a young, pretty woman, blonde, very well groomed and pretty. She was holding her hands over her huge belly. The woman let the medics in, took a seat on the sofa, and introduced herself. "Good afternoon. My name is Linda. I'm having contractions early. I thought they were false. I've had them before, but I only panicked for nothing. So I did not hurry this time. I thought everything will pass by itself. But no, they do not stop and become more and more often. I've called a taxi. I've packed everything. There's a bag in the corridor, everything on the list, as it should be. For me, and for labor, and for the baby. But the taxi doesn't come. There's a snowstorm outside. They only answer wait. And I'm so scared. How long do I have to wait? What if I go into labor at home, and I'm alone? Thank you for being able to get here. I was beginning to panic." "I see. So lie down on the couch, and I'll take a look at you. And give me the exchange card," Cassandra said. "Wow, it's so early when everything is due. What are you mums up to? Let's get dressed immediately. Justin, grab the bag in the corridor and start the car. We need to get this patient to the hospital right away. She's about to go into labor." Linda cried out in pain and curled up on the couch. Water trickled underneath her. Cassandra immediately commanded, "Don't panic. Breathe slowly and deeply. Inhale and exhale. You have to breathe. It's easier to bear the contraction. I'm going to give you a shot." The woman finally calmed down and the pain receded. Cassandra saw that there were framed photographs on the wall in both corners of the room, and on them was a picture of her Harold and the woman in labor, both happy and smiling, with palm trees and the sea in the background. The other photo, on the other hand, was of snowy mountains. Cassandra almost fainted from what she saw, but she still hoped. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the man just looked a lot like her. "And who is that with you in the pictures? Such pictures are beautiful," she said. The birth mother's face immediately brightened, and she replied, "That's Harold, my fiancé. He's so cool, generous, kind. He takes me on holiday twice a year, and the baby is his. It'll be a surprise for him. I love him very much, and he loves me." Cassandra suddenly asked, "So why isn't he around if he loves you so much? Where is he now?" "He's away on a business trip, and we had a big fight. He's still in shock about my pregnancy. Men, you know how they are. It's hard for them to accept it. But it's okay. He'll take our baby in his arms and he'll warm up immediately. After all, it's his baby." The blood rushed to Cassandra's face. She felt sick to her stomach. Now she understood everything. So that's what Harold was traveling on. That's why he wouldn't take the baby from the orphanage. Of course, why would he? After all, he'll soon have his own on the side. That means he's been seeing Linda for at least a year. Scoundrel, traitor. Thought to herself, how could he? And I, silly me, didn't notice anything. I felt sorry for him, tired, trouble at work. Poor man. She was brought out of her sad reflections by the voice of the driver. He flew into the house and looked like a snowdrift. "Carrying back the woman in labor," he said. "Things are bad, Cassandra. My baby won't start. It won't start. I can't understand it. Everything was fine this morning, and we even got here. What do? We've never had such an emergency before." The paramedic splashed her hands. "My God, it's all just bad luck. All right, Justin, call dispatch and have them send another team to the address to help. In the meantime, we're going to have to do this on our own." "Okay, Linda, the situation is changing. We're not going anywhere just yet. Let's go slowly to the bed. We'll be more comfortable there. Lie down and don't panic. I've delivered lots of babies, so we'll be fine." While Linda fought the contraction, as the paramedic had taught her, Cassandra was busy preparing to deliver the baby. She was looking for clean sheets, boiling water, getting the necessary medication and gloves. As luck would have it, she kept coming across traces of Harold's presence in the house. The smell of his cologne in one of the wardrobe drawers, the man's bedroom slippers, 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, and his favorite shower gel. It was all just getting to Cassandra. She was furious. But who knew what it would take for her to pull herself together and not lash out at this woman right here? After all, it was her, Linda, who her Harold had met with, perhaps even on this very bed, and then gone home and lived as if nothing had happened. He ate cheesecakes and steamed patties in the morning, shared his problems, and whispered his love to Cassandra. The paramedic's hands were shaking and her heart was racing, but she held herself together as best she could. Gotta pull myself together, I'm a medic. Took the Hippocratic Oath, which means I should save anyone's life. After all, this Linda obviously has no idea that Harold is married. Otherwise, she wouldn't have given birth to his child and talked so openly about their relationship. In the meantime, the contractions had intensified and the labors had begun. Cassandra was beside her, counting her pulse, listening to the baby's heartbeat, watching the process. The woman in labor was out of control. She was screaming and apologizing. I even had to shout, "Quiet. Calm down. Breathe deeply. Don't be afraid. You're bothering me so much. And the baby too. You must obey me if you want to have a normal birth. Be patient. It's just a little while. You can already see the head. I know you're in a lot of pain and scared right now. It's normal. You just have to be patient. It'll be over soon. Well, gather all your strength to push, not to scream." And indeed, everything went right. Thank God, everything ended well, and soon a marvelous little boy was born. And again, fate was cruel to the paramedic, as if mocking her. She swaddled the baby, treated his eyes and umbilical cord, and held him in her arms. He was crying sonorously, and my heart was torn by the mere realization that here it was, someone else's happiness, and it was not mine again. I am holding the son of my husband, to whom I have nothing to do. That's when the second ambulance crew arrived. The woman in labor and her baby began to be collected to the hospital. The woman was crying with happiness and clasped the baby to her chest. "Thank you, Cassandra. I've totally tortured you, I know. I'm so grateful to you. If it wasn't for you, I don't know how I would have made it here on my own. You know, my son looks just like Harold. He's a carbon copy. He'll be so happy now. Everything's going to be all right." The paramedic sighed heavily and replied dryly, "That's my job. Take care of yourself and your son. All the best to you." She hurried away. After barely finishing her shift, she came home and burst into tears. In an instant, her beloved and dear husband had become disgusting to her. She hated him now. She took off her wedding ring from her finger for the first time in so many years of marriage and threw it on the floor. She threw the photographs of her husband on the floor. She tore them violently into small pieces and threw them in every direction. Then she threw herself around the house, gathering her things, deciding to leave for a while, if only to never see that deceitful and two-faced man again. She thought that divorce was the only possible solution now, so there was no point in dragging it out. There was no point in staying with a man who had trampled on love, humiliated and disgraced their family. The only person Cassandra could go to was Mum. That's where she went, to the village of Radville. She took a couple of weeks off work, just in case. She needed to recover a little. She couldn't help people in her condition. She was shaking and tears were flowing. She packed hastily, taking only the bare necessities. After all, the house belonged to her mother, and she hoped that after the divorce, Harold would move out. Then she would return. Cassandra sobbed the whole way, her face swollen with tears. It seemed like the end of the world, the end of life, the end of everything. Mum, seeing the state of her daughter, only splashed her hands. Cassandra could hardly stand on her feet and could not say anything, only sobbed hysterically. The woman took her into the kitchen, sat her down, gave her some korvallo and gave her a drink. Then she asked quietly, "Daughter, my dear, what's wrong? God, I don't remember you like this at all. Tell me it'll be easier. We'll work something out together." And Cassandra couldn't take it anymore. She told her mom the whole story. She just nodded and listened attentively. Then she hugged her daughter and said firmly, "I can't believe, my daughter, that my son-in-law turned out to be such a scoundrel. I always felt his coldness. He looked arrogantly at everyone. He was very fond of himself. But something like this, who made him like that? My parents are such good people. We talk to them a lot. Yeah, it's a situation. It's not as if he cheated once. A lot of men do that. But to have a second family, and a child too, you can't forgive that. God be with him. Let him live his life as he knows how. Don't torture anyone. Let them all go. Go and get a divorce tomorrow. There's not much to divide. The house is yours. Harold can divide the rest as he likes. Don't cry, sweetheart. Time will mend everything. The pain will fade, and I'll be there for you. In the meantime, you stay with me and keep out of trouble. I don't know what's in Harold's head. It's a 40-minute train ride from here to the city." Cassandra wiped away her tears. A little relieved, she cried out, "Why am I so unlucky, Mum? My husband cheated, no children. How can I live now?" Mrs. Tiffany consoled her daughter. "God's ways are unknown to us, my dear. But one thing I do know is that God does not give us trials beyond our strength. You have to get through it all. After the bad, there will be good. Your happiness is still ahead of you. You just have to have faith." Cassandra said stubbornly, "I don't believe in anyone else, Mummy. I thought I was the happiest I'd ever been. I loved Harold so much, and he betrayed me." The wise woman reassured her daughter. "You can't judge everyone the same, my daughter. Don't get so hot. There are decent men. Just everything in its own time. You still need to come to your senses, calm down. Let's go to bed. In the morning we'll decide what to do." The wood crackled in the stove. Time flowed peacefully in silence. The feather was so soft. Cassandra did fall fast asleep after listening to her mother. And Mrs. Tiffany prayed to the Almighty under the images for a long time, asking Him to take away her girl's grief and sorrow and give her the strength to survive this difficult ordeal. At this time, Harold returned home and could understand nothing. It was as if a hurricane had blown through. The cupboards were open. Half the things were gone. Pieces of photographs were lying on the floor. He started calling Cassandra, but she didn't pick up. She texted him, "I know everything. Congratulations, Daddy, you have a wonderful son. I'm filing for divorce. I can't see you anymore." The blood rushed to Harold's head. He was terribly angry. What nonsense. How did Cassandra find out? Well, maybe it's for the best. I'm sick and tired of it, Harold muttered. Well, I'll give her another one. Just then, Linda called him on the phone. She cheerfully exclaimed, "Hello, my love. Congratulations, you're a daddy now. We've got a little boy, 302. What should we call him? I'm in the 3rd maternity hospital. Will you come? I miss you so much." And she started to tell me about the birth and how it went. Listen, the nurse was so nice, Mrs. Cassandra, I think her name is. A very caring woman. Now it all made sense, and the man shouted angrily, "Fool. It was my wife who delivered your baby, so that's how she knew everything. Who asked you to give birth in the first place? Maybe you gave birth to a child. How should I know? And now you want to tie me down? I'm not going anywhere. I asked you to have a good abortion. You didn't listen. Now you have to raise it yourself. I don't want that child. We're breaking up. And don't call me again. I have enough problems without you right now." It was a short beep. Linda kept looking shocked at the phone and crying bitterly. All her dreams had crumbled at that moment. She had loved Harold very much and had hoped to the last moment that he would eventually get used to the baby and love him. But it couldn't be that a father couldn't love his son, but it turned out he could. And the news that it was Harold's wife who delivered her baby shocked her. She didn't even realize the man was married. They'd been dating for a year and had gone on holiday. How can that be? He never even mentioned that he was married, and he never wore a ring and swore in love. Linda thought. The woman sobbed, looked at the little sleeping lump beside her, and whispered, "Your daddy doesn't need us, Alex. He turned out to be a scoundrel, and what a scoundrel he was. So let him go. We'd better call Grandma and Grandpa. They'll be glad to have a grandson." Harold hung up after talking to Linda and threw the phone away. At first he was horrified. He didn't know what to do. His whole familiar, comfortable family life had collapsed. The wife is filing for divorce. The mistress wants to foster the child. He did not even want to imagine that he would have to change dirty nappies and endure night cries and sleep deprivation. The decision came naturally. Fuck them both. I already judged the house. I have invested so much there, and I will live in peace. Are there not enough other beauties? I'm tormented with children, both my own and other people's. I'm still in full bloom. Women are looking at me themselves. Harold decided to act decisively and threatened Cassandra that he would take away the house because he had renovated it, invested his own money, and in general, he earned more than her, so he would get all the property. The man behaved brazenly and confidently. Cassandra was scared and decided to hire a lawyer. She realized that she would not be able to cope with her ex-spouse alone. Frightened woman signed up for a consultation with Winston Harrison. They said he was one of the best in the city, and from the look of the man is very pleasant, well-groomed, tall with penetrating eyes and a soft, open smile. The woman described the nature of the problem. The man listened attentively, then said, "I'll take your case, Mrs. Cassandra, for free, and I promise your husband won't take your property. I'll do anything for it." Cassandra could not believe her ears. She blanched. "Thank you, of course. But I know how much your services cost. I brought this here. Take it. It's fair." Winston pushed the envelope of money aside and became serious. "You see, Cassandra Valerievna, I'm the one who owes you. I just didn't want to tell you. It's a very sensitive matter. Remember, you once rescued a baby on the street in the freezing cold. Well, this is my son, Calvin. It's a complicated story. I dated a girl for a long time. Her name was Kelly. I loved her a lot, but she was, how can I put it mildly, very wayward and unpredictable. Anyway, we fought and made up. In life, she could not make up her mind what she wanted to become. She was thrown from extreme to extreme. Her rich father contributed to that. He lived with another family abroad, but his daughter regularly sent money in huge amounts, on which she lived luxuriously. She could disappear for a month or two and then reappear. But I'm not like that. I wasn't brought up that way. I need stability and security. Eventually, I got sick of it, so I broke up with her. A couple of months later, Kelly called and announced that she was pregnant and the baby was mine. Obviously, I had my doubts. I mean, she was a very frivolous girl, but nevertheless, like a decent man, I rented her a flat, helped her with the doctor's appointments. I decided for myself that until I made a genetic examination, I would not accept the child. All through the pregnancy, she spoilt my nerves. She threw tantrums, she screamed that she would abort the baby, then claimed that it was not my baby. Totally confused me. and a week before the birth she ran away again, disappeared somewhere. I didn't know what to think. I was worried. I started looking for her. Then I saw that film on the news channel. They were saying that an ambulance crew had saved a baby. They mentioned your name. They were looking for the baby's parents. But I knew right away that Kelly was the only one who could have done it. She left him on the bench outside my house. You know, like she was trying to spite me. I rushed straight to the baby house, had a genetic test done. Calvin is my son, so now I'm raising him on my own. I hired a nanny, and when I picked him up, I felt like he was mine. You see, they found the wretched mother later. She was partying in a nightclub like nothing happened. She was declared insane. Now she's being treated at a psychiatric dispensary. They say it's postnatal depression, but I don't believe it. She was always a bit out of it, didn't take care or think about the baby. They took away her license. I insisted. She didn't mind. What kind of mother is she? So I'll worry about my son all my life. You can't tell what's in her mind. That's the way it is. So I should thank you for saving my son. And as a token of my gratitude, I'll help you too. I don't doubt that we'll win this case. I'll do my best to find dirt on your husband. If he's been living on 2 families, he must have other sins. I'll keep you posted. Just leave me the address and phone number. Winston wanted very much to help Cassandra. Truth be told, it wasn't just out of gratitude. He liked this sweet, slightly sad woman with brown-black eyes. He checked Harold's entire entourage and learned things that made his own hair stand on end. It turns out that the businessman was a real ladies' man. In addition to the official wife and mistress, who gave him a son, he had 4 other women in parallel. It is unclear how he managed to deceive everyone and remain unpunished. After all, they all did not know about each other, and each thought that she was the man's only and favorite. First on the list was, of course, Linda. Winston decided to start with her and visited her. The poor woman wasn't herself. She had even lost her milk from the stress. She felt the breakup intensely to this day. I don't know what happened to Harold. He never shouted before. He was so gentle. I used to be his secretary. I understand. It's an old story. At first I thought it was an adventure, a fling. But then I really fell in love with my boss. He never told me he was married, and he never wore a ring. We had such an affair we went on holidays. I hinted to him more than once that I wanted to get married, but he kept joking and stalling. He had problems at work, or he had no time, or later. But when I got pregnant, Harold seemed to change, started yelling, threatening, demanding that I get rid of the child, and even gave me money. And I lied to him. I couldn't. The doctor talked me out of it, said it would cause health problems. I could be infertile forever. And then I'm 25. I have my own place. The right age to have a baby. I want a child from the man I love. Anyway, I hid everything until the last minute. But you see, my belly was growing. And soon Harold figured it out. He gave me a scandal and left on a business trip. But I was naive. I hoped to the last minute that he'd come to his senses, that when he held the baby in his arms, he'd melt and love his son. I phoned him from the maternity hospital to make him happy, and he insulted me. Turns out Harold's married. Not only that, but his wife delivered my son at home. Holy woman, by God, I couldn't have done that. I hate myself now. I've ruined someone else's family without knowing it. And Harold's a scoundrel. I'll never forgive him. My son myself raised my own, my parents will help me, even though they are happy grandchild. Winston immediately suggested, Linda, this is all very sad, and you have my heartfelt sympathy. I have a huge favor to ask of you. You could come to the courthouse and tell us all about it. The fact is that Cassandra is divorcing her husband, and that bastard is not only cheating, but he wants to take her house away from her. even though it belongs to her mother. Anyway, you're going to be a great help to Cassandra. Together we can teach Harold a lesson and punish him. Otherwise, he will continue to cheat women and maim lives. The lawyer was very afraid that the woman would refuse. It happens all the time. Few people want to publicize personal drama, but surprisingly, Linda responded firmly. I will come and spit in that scoundrel's face and apologize to Cassandra. It will be fair and just. I don't doubt that I will help her, for she saved me and my son, and I am indebted to her, Linda said. The other 4 mistresses were also outraged by Harold's behavior and also agreed to confirm in court the affair with him, and each of them was a wealthy girl. The scandal was going to be impressive. Thus, the evidence was irrefutable. Winston also prepared all the documents for the house, where the owner was Cassandra's mother, and Harold had nothing to do with its acquisition. With all this, he decided to go to Cassandra's house to prepare his client morally for the upcoming battle. He was greeted very cordially. Mom had set the table. Cassandra had just boiled some cabbage dumplings. It was a pleasure. Mrs. Tiffany had tactfully retired to her room after lunch, giving her daughter a chance to talk to the lawyer alone. Cassandra was very anxious, kept asking, So, Winston, did you manage to find anything? What are my chances? This isn't just Mom's house, it's our family home. My grandfather built it with his own hands. 3 generations have lived there. I can't just give it to Harold. The lawyer hurried to reassure her client. Cassandra, don't worry. I have such evidence on my hands that I will break your ex-husband. But before I do, I'd like to tell you everything. This may come as a great shock to you, I warn you. Personally, I've seen a lot of things I've been shocked by. I believe that you first and foremost, as my client, should know everything so that you can prepare yourself. When Winston explained everything, Cassandra, instead of bursting into tears, suddenly started laughing so loudly to the point of hiccups. You know, Winston, after all I've learned about my husband, I'm even strangely relieved. It turns out that among his string of countless mistresses, I had the place of honor of wife. First place, so to speak. Oh, Harold, what a bastard. My God, I had no idea what a monster I was living with under the same roof. How stupid we women are. I've tried so hard to be a model housewife. I cooked everything fresh, waited for him, and he cheated on me left and right. How can you tell me, Winston? How can you trust people after that? Linda's the one I feel the most sorry for. That bastard wouldn't even give up his own son. It's unheard of. So he doesn't care about his own kids or anyone else's. He just wants to enjoy himself and use women. That's all. I've wasted so many years on that bastard. Now I'm left without a husband and without children. I begged Harold so much to take the baby from the orphanage, but he refused, Cassandra said. Winston shook his head and suddenly said, You are such a wonderful woman, Cassandra. Believe me, I mean that sincerely. I have someone to compare you to. I wish my Calvin had such a loving mummy. I also like you very much, not only as a person but as a woman. Your husband is a fool not to appreciate such a wife and mistress. Cassandra was taken aback. She looked at Winston carefully. Are you serious now? You're not joking? I remember how I felt when I took Calvin in my arms. I couldn't get away from him. I wanted to hold him and kiss him all the time. You see, I almost went on a crime spree. I thought I'd take him home. You see, I suffer from loneliness. I would give anything in the world to be able to raise and love a baby. Winston touched her hand ever so gently and said quietly, Now then, Cassandra, after the trial, I will not let you go anywhere else. Is that clear? Otherwise, I'll be a complete fool. You will never be alone again. We will love and raise Calvin together. I won't ever hurt you or change you. I promise. Do you agree? Answer me? Tears sprang from Cassandra's eyes on their own. She and Winston hugged tightly and sat like that for a long time. And that was far more important than kissing or intimacy. In that moment, their souls found each other. The court was full of people. Winston had made sure that the press and reporters were there, promising them the sensation of the century. Seeing such a crowd, Harold was confused. He thought his wife would come. He would divorce her quickly, and they would say goodbye forever. But he hadn't yet seen the biggest surprise. Linda and the rest of his mistresses were deliberately waiting in another room to make a spectacular reappearance. That was Winston's plan. Harold was so self-confident that he didn't even bother to hire a lawyer, just counted all the expenses for all the years they had been together. He began his statement in a very presumptuous manner. "Your Honor, I have lived with my wife for many years, but she never bore me a child. She's infertile, and I want to divorce her. As to the division of property, I'll say this: Cassandra made a pittance. I have my own business, so she's always lived off me. Therefore, I have every right to most of our property, including our house, in which I invested a lot of money. Take a look at this. Here are all the renovation costs, every penny of it. But that's not all. My wife is insane. She's insane. She's not allowed to see patients at all. She even wanted to steal someone else's baby and ask me to be a part of it. She has obsessions and hallucinations. She keeps accusing me of cheating on her." The hall buzzed. The judge looked intently at Cassandra, and she whispered, "What are you lying about? How can you do that?" The lawyer gestured for her to be quiet, not to disrupt the order of the courtroom, and stood up to speak. "Your Honor, I have irrefutable evidence that Harold Willis had mistresses. One of them even bore him a child, which he refused to have. I'd like to call Linda Smith to the stand. This woman worked as a secretary at Willis Company, and with her he almost started a second family. At the same time, being officially married to Cassandra, she is ready to testify and tell how it all happened." And then something unimaginable began. First, Linda spoke and told how long their relationship had been, how he lied about not being married, how he left her before giving birth. Then the other deceived women Harold was having an affair with spoke up. There was such an uproar. The women got angry and shouted that they would tear the bastard apart right there in the courtroom. Harold was very frightened and didn't know where to go for fear of being lynched. All his confidence instantly evaporated. He realized that he had been caught in his own lies. At the end of the trial, Winston handed over the deed to Cassandra's house, and it became clear that it could not legally belong to Harold, because it belonged to his mother. After such strong evidence, even the judge was amazed. And of course, Cassandra got a divorce, her house, and half of the acquired property as it should be. But Harold was left with nothing. After the hearing, Linda approached Cassandra. She was very worried. She didn't know where to hide her eyes in shame. "Cassandra, I'm very sorry about the way things turned out. It turns out that I myself, without knowing it, broke up your family. Can you guess who I am? You delivered a baby and saved me and my son. Honestly, I'm proud of you. You are a saintly woman, and I am very guilty before you and ask for your forgiveness." The paramedic only smiled bitterly and replied, "Yes, you are right. When I recognized Harold in the photo in your house, I could hardly contain my anger. There was such a thing. But after it became known that besides you, Harold also had mistresses, I realized that it was him. Because if a man loves a man, he won't look away. You didn't know that he was married. You were also hoping for marriage and just wanted to have a family, like any normal woman. So we're both victims of this bastard. So I suggest we become friends. A sorority of deceived women. We could socialize. We have a lot to talk about." Linda was so excited. "Really? I'm all for that. But then you're welcome to visit. Just leave me your address or phone number, and my son and I will come to you. Thank you again. I won't say goodbye." Harold sat in the car. He was upset and furious. His whole plan had failed. Cassandra now looked flawless. All his misdemeanors had become public knowledge. Just then he saw Cassandra coming out of the building. He couldn't help but admire her. Slender in a light dress, her hair falling to her shoulders. She was being led by the same young lawyer. Both were smiling and talking about something. Strange, how come that during their years together Harold had completely stopped noticing how beautiful his wife was? He was always looking for fun on the side. He suddenly got so angry he jumped out of the car and ran up to the couple. "So you won the case. Disgraced me in front of everyone. Well, nothing, I'll show you all. I'll find myself such a young beauty. You'll see, you'll be sorry you ever got divorced." Cassandra, surprised at the insolence of her former spouse, replied sharply, "You have left me no other choice, Harold. How and with whom you will live and love now is no longer my concern. I hope we will not see each other again." And Winston added sternly, "And remember, Citizen Willis, don't try to make life difficult for Cassandra again. You'll have to deal with me personally. I am truly sorry for you and the women you have deceived. I hope no one else will fall for your deception once it's publicized. Now step back, we're in a hurry. Have a good day." The case received widespread publicity. The press was full of headlines about a lovable and conniving businessman who had managed to deceive not only his wife, but so many women. Of course, the bad publicity reached the high society, and from Harold turned away from the largest companions. Business eventually began to fall apart. The man was on the verge of bankruptcy. Yes, and personal life also did not add up. His parents condemned him and stopped communicating with him. They were ashamed that their son turned out to be such a scumbag. Harold was angry, spent nights with one and another girl of easy behavior. But all these fleeting entertainments no longer pleased him. The interest was gone. Wanted, as before, warmth and comfort. That someone sincerely loved him and pity, understand and support. But only nothing can be returned. And now the aging lover was, in fact, no one needed him. The feeling of loneliness and longing was eating him up from the inside. Even alcohol didn't help. Only now he began to think more and more often. What does he live for? For whom? Cassandra's fortunes began to change for the better. She began to live with Winston, in the evenings with pleasure fiddled with little Calvin, and literally dissolved in motherhood. How great it was to surround the baby with care and love, to bathe him, to play with him, to stroke those little hands and kiss his rosy cheeks. The man also could not be happy that finally found in the person of Cassandra loving mother, faithful companion and excellent hostess. After his affair with the flighty Kelly, his life now seemed to him like a paradise. Everyone at work was surprised, especially the chauffeur. Justin kept saying, "That's how it is, Cassandra. Just like in that fairy tale, she walked and found her son. They won't believe you. It's not for nothing that the boy didn't want to let you go. He must have sensed your heart." Time flew by unnoticed. Here is the first tooth, and the first step. And the first word mummy was uttered by little Calvin. Linda often came to visit Cassandra and Winston with her son, because her Alex and Calvin were almost the same age. They chatted together in their childish language, rattling rattles. The women became best friends. They discussed their female joys and sorrows together, shared the successes of the kids. When the children were a year old, it was decided to baptize them. Cassandra chose Linda as godmother for Calvin, and Winston took his colleague Anthony as godfather. The young people immediately got along with each other. They became fond of each other, and then true love. Now Cassandra was calm for her friend. Anthony was a man of integrity. He was the kind of man you could commit to, and he was good with children. He was happy to take care of Alex. A year later, another miracle happened, and Cassandra unexpectedly became pregnant. She couldn't believe her happiness. It turned out she wasn't infertile at all. Winston was overjoyed. He loved Cassandra and had long dreamed of having children together. especially since the ultrasound showed it was going to be a girl. Only once during all this time Cassandra accidentally met with Harold. They ran into each other literally head-on in a shopping center. The woman was almost pregnant, waddling funny like a duck. Next to her, Winston was carrying Calvin in his arms. The family was shopping for the holiday. The baby was gabbling away, and like all babies, reaching for the brightly colored merchandise. Cassandra laughed as she explained to Calvin what this or that was called. And of course she couldn't resist buying him a toy. The couple didn't notice that Harold had been looking at them for about 10 minutes. He too was wandering around the shopping center on a pre-holiday day. No, he wasn't expecting visitors. He rarely had visitors anymore. He just wanted to pass the time. It was unbearable to spend weekends and holidays all alone. And then he saw Cassandra and admired her again. Surprisingly, her fullness and protruding large belly did not spoil her in any way. On the contrary, it made her touching. Her eyes shone. You could see how much she loved the boy. And her new husband, how he looks at her with tenderness, how he circles around them. You can see at once. They have a strong family. And again I felt so disgusting, so disgusting. I wanted to howl like a wolf. I looked at them and thought, God, what an arsehole I was. But what was I missing? A full house. I had a beautiful wife, smart and beautiful. She loved me so much. I mean, how many times Cassandra asked me to have a baby? But at the time, I was furious at the mere thought of a strange child screaming in the house, disturbing my peace, my wife's attention diverted to it. What am I left with now? There's no one around. How scary is that? I have a son, my own flesh and blood, little Alex. He grows up without me, grows up and calls Linda's new husband Daddy. And I'm out of business again, and I gave up on him. His own mother doesn't even want to see him. After that scandal, it's unheard of. Cassandra's like family. She's in touch with Linda. She even visits her grandson in secret. But she doesn't want to know her own son. Everyone's turned their backs on me. How is that fair? Cassandra glanced at Harold and recognized him. But she didn't even say hello. Instead, she turned away and walked in the other direction with her family. Harold was tormented by longing, loneliness, and anger at the world, not realizing that he was the cause of it all. Cassandra put Calvin to bed in the evening and told him a story. The baby fell sweetly asleep. Winston finished washing the dishes after dinner. He now helped his wife in everything, realizing that she was going through a difficult time. He laid Cassandra on the sofa, put a pillow under her waist, and began to massage her swollen legs, gently stroking and rubbing her skin. Tired, my good one? How is my princess? Has she also gone to sleep, or is she still dancing in her tummy? Be patient just a little longer. Soon our little girl will be born, and we'll say hello to everyone. It won't be easy at first. Calvin is still small, and the daughter will be born. But it's okay. I'll help. We'll manage. Cassandra closed her eyes, smiling blissfully. It felt so good. She said quietly, How lucky I am to have you, darling. How long have I waited for you? And Calvin is my mascot. It was with his arrival in my life that everything began to change. Only with you I realized that the main thing in life is not work at all, but family and children. Thank you for that. Don't worry. My mom's just waiting for her granddaughter to be born. She promised to come straight away and help at first. We will definitely manage because we are a family. At her mother-in-law's anniversary party, Ashley saw her husband disappear somewhere, and when she mistook the door for a door, she accidentally overheard. Ashley held a thick, glossy piece of cardboard with a beautiful, ornate script on it. It was an invitation to an anniversary party for Jennifer Anderson, wife of the owner of a large and prosperous firm, mother and grandmother of a large family, a person with a very wide circle of acquaintances and interests. Jennifer Anderson was Ashley's mother-in-law. Stories about the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law are numerous, as well as stories about the complex mutual feelings of the mother-in-law, and just as full of stamps and prejudices. How many stories are told about unhappy girls who fall into the power of evil mothers-in-law, who under a magnifying glass examine every step and act of young women who dare to encroach on the most precious thing in life, their dear boys, their sons. And the stories about elderly women forcing their sons to turn their wives into domestic servants. And the horror stories about how mothers-in-law spread rumors about the immorality of daughters-in-law. However, according to the rumor mill, a rare daughter-in-law is indebted to her so-called mom. Ashley had always been distrustful and skeptical of such stories. It seemed to her that all this is something like folklore, in which the girl must be necessarily beautiful, mother-in-law a monster, and daughter-in-law Cinderella. Perhaps Ashley was just lucky she got a woman unusual in every sense as a mother-in-law. You could say extraordinary, beautiful, proud, smart, rich, and happy. This amazing woman simply did not need to assert herself at someone else's expense. She was unattainable as it was. Jennifer Anderson was truly generously gifted by nature. Beautiful, without any reservations or conventions. She was something like the movie divas of the 50s and 60s with her femininity. She had deep, as if velvet eyes, full, well-defined lips and lush, shiny hair. However, unlike the same Lalo Brigida, Jennifer was blonde. In women, Jennifer Anderson caused unhealthy envy, in men quite healthy and reasonable interest. Both feelings were strong and almost unchanged, despite the fact that inexorably the years went by. The fact that Jennifer Anderson still decided to celebrate her anniversary, and even with enough scope, as evidenced by the official invitation, was, on the one hand, expected still 55 years old. Whatever you say, it is a special date for any person. And the peculiar magic of the fact that more than half a century has already been lived has an effect on anyone, even the most hardened opponent of celebrating any events in one's life. On the other hand, Ashley knew well how Jennifer Anderson desperately resisted the persistent attempts of relatives, and especially the head of the family, loving husband John Smith, to organize a holiday. Do I really have to remind everyone once again how old I am? And to do it with loud music, fireworks, and in front of a crowd of people, she muttered. Speaking of old age. The woman was certainly being a little flirtatious. She looked not just good for her age, but great. She was in excellent physical shape, and her finances did not limit her at all. So no one, including the Jubilee herself, had any doubts that her so-called old age was a very conditional concept. But John Smith begged her, affectionately calling his wife a pet nickname which he gave her many years ago, when they 20-year-old students just married and began their long, difficult, very different, but still happy family life. Well, let's have at least a small party for 100 people, no more. Seeing the horror in his wife's eyes, he shrugged his shoulders and hurriedly muttered. Well, how? Well, look at this. Children, grandchildren, James and Robert with all theirs. Anthony, Emily, if they fly in, of course. That's 13 people. 2 me, my sister and her husband, my favorite little brother and his new girlfriend. I know you don't like her very much, but what can I do? That's 19 people. All right? There's another 80 seats to spare. In case your aunt deigns to come, Jennifer replied mockingly. What about our friends, your girlfriends? After all, I have a lot of colleagues and partners who are eager to congratulate you. Well, let's say they're not trying to congratulate me. They're trying to congratulate you. They don't care about me, they just waste money. Speaking of waste, I will agree to all this horror, which for some reason will be considered a holiday, on one condition: no laying gifts and wreaths on my pedestal. You hear that, so you can tell your coworkers and partners from me. And our friends already know it. For a bouquet of more than 15 flowers and a gift more expensive than 1,000 rubles I will kick out, warning everyone, said John Smith. He was suffering and happy at the same time. He sighed. He was terribly pleased that he had persuaded his mother to organize the celebration. It was an opportunity to bring their entire family home at last. His daughter Amber and her husband, who lived in Moscow, would be coming, bringing their youngest grandson, whom they hadn't seen in person, with their grandfather. Son Jake will come with his wife Ashley and granddaughter Emma, Grandpa's favorite. Those, though, are always on hand as it is, since they both work at the firm. Maybe, hell knows, in this case Emily, their eldest daughter, will arrive from America with her children, all grown up and already speaking Russian with a distinct accent, like foreigners. And what is quite unbelievable, but suddenly pull up from England, where he studies, the youngest son Anthony. And John Smith suffered mostly for those who would be invited, having imagined what tortures they would face in choosing gifts and flowers under such a strict limit on the part of the birthday girl. They were a remarkably handsome and harmonious married couple, having already celebrated 30 years together. Somehow they managed to preserve not only respect and gratitude for each other, which is not uncommon in older married couples, but also the very real tenderness that makes your eyes sparkle when you look at the one you love. John Smith was convinced and never concealed that, without the support and help of his wife, he would never have achieved a tenth of what he had to date. And there was much to be proud of. He was the owner and permanent head of a large transportation company that delivered goods all over the world. He had started many years ago with 2 cheaply bought trucks that were ready to fall apart, if not during the fulfillment of this order, then during the next one. John sometimes recalled with a laugh how he drove one of the trucks for the first time, and later he often got behind the wheel if on the eve of a trip it turned out that the driver for some reason could not go. He earned money, took out loans, signed contracts, bought new cars, in general, got back on his feet. Meanwhile, Jennifer, an economist by education, gave birth and raised children, ran the household, worked, and at night did the bookkeeping for her husband's company. She was always there for me, and when everything was fine, and when it seemed that it could not be worse. In the mid-90s, the first serious money and opportunities appeared. Unfortunately, big money always comes with big problems. When John Smith was accused of concealing income and non-payment of taxes, and even arrested, Jennifer Anderson personally learned the difference between the CPD and the CISO, addresses of police departments, prosecutors, lawyers' offices, all those institutions whose thresholds she beat back in search of justice. In their case, justice did prevail. Thanks in large part to Jennifer's persistence and desperate determination, and the evidence she provided to the court in the form of financial documents. John was released with all charges dropped. But those terrifying few weeks neither he nor Jennifer will be able to forget for the rest of their lives. Jennifer got me out, John recounted with conviction. Without her, I would have ended up in jail, no doubt about it. And I'd be in jail for the full program. Or maybe I would have gone crazy even sooner. I was having stomach problems at the time, as it turned out. So Jennifer took a bus across town every day to bring me boiled meatballs. So I'm sitting there one day complaining about everything and myself. And most importantly, there's no hope. I've already given up. So I open the container with food. And there is the word "hang in there" in a heart made of peas. I almost broke my head. I'm thinking, why are you so weak? She's out there fighting like a fish against the ice with 3 kids in her arms. She's saving you. And you're a big, strong man giving up. It took my heart so much that I cried. And the guards then spent about an hour looking for some substances that supposedly cheered me up. When the case was resolved, Emily was fully immersed in the company's finances. Despite the serious turnover, money was still desperately short. The 5 of them continued to live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, drive used foreign cars, and dress in thrift stores. Abnormal, the wives of the so-called new Russians said about Jennifer without holding back their irritation. No, have you seen what she wears, although with her data, of course. For them it was almost unthinkable to recognize that Jennifer is not dressed in branded things, fabulously priced, and inexpensive but elegant suit, which sat perfectly on her figure, which has not suffered in any way from the birth of 4 children. She looked great. In other words, her data was recognized even by silicone beauties, over which it seemed time and stress had no power. Because of her husband, who for many years walked around in old jeans and tattered sneakers, she made a real dandy. "John, you're the head of the company, not a truck yard loader," she rebuked. "How do you walk like that? Your stomach's out. What are you hanging out there? You basically have nothing there. No, that tie doesn't suit you at all. You should wear a plaid shirt and a gray suit. Now I can talk to you more or less." As a result of her years of effort. John Smith, naturally stately, broad-shouldered, and with correct facial features, turned into a man who was followed with interested looks by ladies of all ages, social status, and professions. "Here, you've made trouble for yourself," Jennifer laughed. "How to save such a handsome man, I cannot think. For John, however, there were no other women in the world. She was the only one, his Jennifer, the center of his universe, the love of his life. Family was a source of well-deserved pride for John Smith, perhaps even more proud than he was of the firm he had built from scratch with his own hands. Here, too, he always recognized his wife's crucial contribution. These are Jennifer's children. And this is the side note. Those somewhat bitter words were somewhat true. Children, daughters Emily and Amber, sons Jake and Anthony, Jennifer brought up herself, despite his sometimes unthinkable, sometimes no less than her husband, busy at work. Even when serious money appeared in the family and she could afford a nanny, there were no outsiders in the house. The children, to the envy of everyone around them, were growing up almost perfect. Look, you both need to sit down and write a book. How do you raise a normal child if you have money? That, in these times, it is a whole science. Bitterly reasoned one of Jennifer's acquaintances, who has a teenage son. The Smith children were well-educated, practiced, as should be the offspring of a decent family, dancing, foreign languages, tennis. Jake went rock climbing and Emily played the violin well. At the same time, all four of them really respected and loved their parents and seemed to genuinely appreciate everything that was invested in them. Emily, who graduated from high school, went to study in the United States. But even here, everyone who expected the Smiths' educational system to fail was disappointed. Emily actually graduated from university and started working. They did not go crazy from lack of control and did not go downhill. True, Emily did not return to Russia, married an American, and lived happily with her husband and 2 children, sending her family photos from the ever-sunny and green California. Amber, who was younger than her sister by almost 2 years, to go to study abroad, categorically refused. She was a quiet, homely girl, the best, as they jokingly called her in the family. She studied at the Institute without any surprises. She married a guy she knew from childhood, the son of one of the longtime clients of her father's firm. She raised 3 children, including twin boys, who apparently after a while were quite capable of tearing grandfather's mansion on a brick. And the youngest, born more recently. Jake, the 3rd child in the family, was his parents' main hope for the continuation of the family business. John, in his mid-60s, was still full of energy and strength and had a firm grip on the company's management. Still, periodically he and Jennifer would add in a favorite game of, "Oh, John, read from the morning. My bones are breaking. My head is shaking. Guess it's time, old stump. Time to hit the hay." Smirking, Jennifer belted out the old songs, thoughtfully stroking her flawlessly shaved cheek, adjusting the stiff collar of her shirt, and he easily picked his wife up in his arms. Jake had graduated from a prestigious university with a degree in law and had done an internship abroad. And after a couple of years spent at his father's insistence in the law enforcement agencies, he became legal counsel for their transportation company. To the amazement of those around him who had expected Jake to move up the ladder quickly, he had been sitting for 3 years in the rank and file position of in-house counsel, doing contract work. As if looking out for his son, deciding something extremely important to himself, his family, and the company. Jennifer, used to trusting her husband implicitly to evaluate people and their usefulness to the company, only raised her eyebrows in surprise. "He's not pulling his weight," John began with his spouse. "Well, not at all, from the word go. Well, to draw up a contract, to check the legal framework, that's no problem. But there's no spark of interest in Jake, no thirst for business." Jake seemed satisfied with this state of affairs. He went to work faithfully, fiddled with paperwork, and sometimes went on business trips. And he didn't seem to mind the fact that even his own wife, Ashley, had long since become much more authoritative in business than he was. They had a daughter, Mary, whom the grandfather, as the only granddaughter among his boy grandchildren, loved in a special way. Anthony, the 2nd son of the Andersons, was the youngest and last child in the family. As they jokingly called his parents, not by chance, not by accident, but announced in public that she will not give birth again. Jennifer just a few days later realized that they clearly overdid it with their categorical statement. "So what are we going to do?" she asked the head of the family. "Like what?" "Give birth, of course, not realizing what there is to discuss here," John declared. "I mean, you and I are in our 5th decade. People will say, 'Crazy in your old age,'" Jennifer laughed. "I don't care. I want a son. Or a daughter. Or 2, the young father broke off again. The baby was born like all the other children, healthy and active. On top of that, he was clearly the most handsome and talented of the four. Apparently, Anthony was born specifically to finish the envious Anderson family. The guy was easy to learn, showing brilliant results, great swimmer, easily and casually chattered in 2 languages, and could do it almost simultaneously. He was as tall as his father, but his mother's refined, muted, as if slightly covered beauty was clearly visible in him. Of the 4 of them, he probably took the most from his parents. After the 8th or 9th grade, he was sent to college in England, and no one had little doubt that it was Anthony will be the successor of his parents. Although of course no one said it out loud. With the birth of Anthony in a friendly family suddenly appeared an unexpected problem. Jake disliked the baby. If teenage girls perceived the appearance of the baby with great delight, Jake was not to Jake's liking. "What do you need him for?" "To replace me," Jake whispered to his mother, swallowing angry tears. "Jake, my darling, what are you saying? How can Anthony replace you? You're a big boy, and you say such stupid things." Jennifer hugged her son fearfully. "You and I are spoiled," she reasoned in the evening, putting John's dinner on a plate. "We're used to everything going smoothly for us. So now I don't even know what to do." "Do nothing, John," the chief and family caretaker said authoritatively. "He'll get over it. He'll get used to it eventually." Whether Jake got used to the fact that he was no longer the youngest in the family, and therefore not automatically the most favorite child, it is not known, but complaints from him were not heard anymore. And Jake's lack of much love for his brother was just something they were used to. Jennifer Anderson treated everything brilliantly simple. "These are my children's problems, not mine. For me, they are all good." Having met her future mother-in-law, Ashley was at first shocked. God, what kind of women? It turns out, there are in the world, she thought, returning home. She thought when she got home. Then, as she got to know her better, she was no longer afraid of her fantastic power. Mother-in-law was impeccable, polite, emphasized correctness, did not teach anyone to live. She stayed out of the girlfriend's way and didn't let her own distance be broken. Or rather, it would never occur to Ashley to try to be friends with this queen-like lady. Jennifer Anderson had been the company's permanent and irreplaceable CFO for many years, and in fact, it was truly a family business. A few years ago, she firmly declared to her frightened husband, "That's it. I'm going on vacation. I calculated you owe me for 24 years, 672 days of regular vacation and 336 days of additional vacation. Here I go on vacation, and then we'll see." Now she lived in a large country mansion surrounded by green lawns, grew roses, led, as she herself put it, the free life of a very wealthy pensioner, and was preparing to meet her 55th birthday in the circle of close and not so close people. The celebration was still 2 weeks away, but Ashley rushed to the mirror as if she had to leave in a few hours. Let's just say I could still lose a little weight. My thoughts were scattering like scared sparrows. Damn, I wanted to sit on buckwheat last month. And I should do some exercise. Like squatting? She opened the tall, mirrored closet where several of her weekend dresses hung in the corner, bunched up in a small rack. Ashley pulled the items out, spread them out on the bed, and stared at them doubtfully. There was clearly nothing suitable for the upcoming event. So she had no dress, no shoes. She had no idea what to do with her hair. And that was the end of it, anyway. She crouched on the edge of the bed and stared fearfully at her reflection and thought she should call Pamela. A life-saving thought flashed through her mind, and she felt better immediately. Pamela was Ashley's best and in fact only friend. They'd been close since they were kids, spending more time together all their lives than some siblings. You could start with the fact that their families lived on the same landing, and the girls had been visiting each other from one door to the other since kindergarten. They were fed in both apartments, without distinguishing who was their own and who was someone else's. They helped with lessons and advice. It happened that they both received at the same time from one of their parents. They didn't go to school together, though, because it turned out that Ashley was a year older, although Pamela, always active in bullying, was the leader of their little company. This friendship lasted until the end of their schooling. Then the girls drifted apart. Ashley went to law school, and Pamela, saying that papers for a living she will not earn anyway, swung to hairdresser-stylist courses. In vain that our poodle 10 years sheared and hairstyles was, she laughed, explaining to her friend the unexpected choice of profession. Jokes, 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 but with the choice of her life's work, Pamela was not mistaken. It really became the very thing she did with understanding, pleasure, and interest, and, as a consequence, with excellent results. Possessing a kind of natural instinct and imagination, she unmistakably decided what the client needed and what the client wanted herself. Pamela was only secondarily interested in the client. Decisively flicking scissors, she in the blink of an eye changed the next visitor not only appearance but sometimes her whole life. Getting my hair cut and colored has been the dream of dozens, if not hundreds of women, Pamela said when Ashley said, laughing, that she had been offered money for her cell phone number. I'm not just cutting your hair, I'm selling people happiness. Pamela laughed. Ashley, what are you doing? Are you flying? You did, didn't you? Well, I had this girl come to me yesterday. A face like a horse's, long, big forehead, hair like bags on her shoulders. She sits down in front of me and says, trim the ends. Can you imagine? So I did. I cut half her head into bangs and the rest of it to her shoulders. She blinked, and it was a miracle. It scared me. You were scared? Ashley asked incredulously. Imagine, I thought, this is going to be a huge scandal, but I was right. I clicked, and it was the normal length. She was instantly beautiful. I shielded her from our receptionist. I asked her what, and she said happy. Ashley knew from her own experience that after a successful visit to the hairdresser's shop, one can really become much happier. She herself naturally had what Pamela called the perfect scout look. You're impossible to remember, she said. No offense, okay? It's like you're invisible. I mean, there's me, there's no me, it's the same. Not like that, Pamela said angrily. You're there, but you don't stand out at all. You're like a shadow, for God's sake. And you're my personal embarrassment. I'm itching to clean up my act. Oh, Ashley, 3 hours of work and you won't even recognize yourself. That's the point. She laughed. I'd really like to recognize myself. You're a boring person. Pamela waved her hand and gave Ashley the usual array of treatments, a dye job and light hair ministrations. I wish you'd learned something good from your mother-in-law. I saw your Jennifer the other day. That's what I call a firebird. After X-raying their manipulations, Ashley looked at herself in the mirror and realized she was happy about the salesman. Pamela is hardly exaggerating. When Ashley explained to Pamela that the firebird had an anniversary coming up and would like to look more decent, she almost smashed her phone out of emotion. How lucky are you that you even thought to call me? She shouted into the phone. I do not need to come to you. I already know that you have nothing suitable for such an occasion. What about it? Is that my gold dress? Ashley asked pitifully. But it's not gold, it's brown. And you look like a wooden potato in it, said Pamela sternly. My God, you're going to a gala for one of the most stylish aunts in town. You can at least listen to understanding people now. A few days later, Ashley was almost ready, and once again she was convinced that Pamela knew what she was doing. Don't you dare get thin or fat, she ordered. I'll be there the day before to color her head. I have a few more clients from your beau monde. The organization of the anniversary party exceeded all expectations. A huge striped awning was stretched over the emerald lawn, under which the guests walked between the light tables with snacks. The ubiquitous, slender, over-the-knee waiters with trays of drinks were there at the thought of a drink. The light music didn't interfere with the conversation at all. Jake and Ashley and Mary arrived before most of the guests. As members of the family, they had to take part in welcoming the new arrivals. 3-year-old Mary, however, quickly dismissed her mother's instructions and, with her grandfather's full support, rushed to meet her cousins, the children of Emily's eldest daughter, who had flown in from Miami. Jake vanished, and Ashley found herself in front of her mother-in-law. Hello, Ashley. The mother-in-law greeted her daughter-in-law with a regal nod. Come sit with me and watch our guests ruin the lawn with their stilettos. I told John it wasn't a good idea for the girl or the lawn. Now he's going to have to deal with it. Ashley sat happily next to Jennifer Anderson. She took small sips of her favorite cocktail and looked around for familiar faces. There were an unusually large number of people, mostly strangers. It took her a long time to finally discern among them those she knew. Except, as always, the magnificent patriarch of the John Smith family. She saw Amber at once, surrounded by her rambunctious offspring, whom she was carefully trying to quiet, for the boys had received strong support in the person of Mary's cousin. Watching anxiously as Mary tried to drag one of the brothers between the legs of a chair, Ashley suddenly heard. It was a bad idea to bring the kids here, wasn't it? Jennifer Anderson looked sternly at Ashley, who suddenly felt like a delinquent schoolgirl. We'll get home, she decided sullenly to herself. And then she heard the infectious laughter of the Jubilee. Ears. Yes, I'm joking, she said, having laughed off. For me, so disperse all this motley exhibition of fabrics, leave one little girl and frolic to their heart's content. That would be a jubilee. She spoke to one of the guests, and Ashley continued to look around at the crowd. Apparently, neither Emily and the kids nor Anthony could make it her mother-in-law read Ashley's mind. Anthony is in the middle of a semester, and I told Emily not to come. Let her teach my grandchildren English first. She was an amazing woman. Once again, Ashley was admired. How did I end up in this family? Ashley was born into a family that was far removed from anything that currently surrounded her. From birth, she'd lived in a simple paneled 5-story building, where her neighbors wished her good health when she sneezed. The house was old, with benches by the porches and watchful grandmothers who knew everything. Ashley's father, Ben, had been a factory engineer all his life. He was an incredibly calm and kind man. Ben tried to do everything the right way and thoughtfully. However, he made the mistake of marrying Margaret. She was a sweet and capricious creature, younger than Ben by more than 10 years. The age difference became a chasm for them. The girl was not just younger, she was 10 times stupider, but demanded tenfold care of herself. Having given birth to a daughter by accident rather than consciously, Margaret quickly realized that she did not want to do motherhood. The girl's de facto mother became Ben. Margaret quietly disappeared from their lives. Ashley was too young to pay attention. Ben, of course, noticed his wife's disappearance, but there was no time to wonder. The grandmothers on the benches only shook their heads as they watched him run from the nursery with his baby in his arms, laden with bags. Ben learned to make milk porridge and fry pancakes. He cringed when Ashley was sick and seemed to be 100 times over himself with her. He helped with classes. If the engineer had no problems with math and physics, the rules of the Russian language stumped him. So he spent nights studying his daughter's textbook, trying to understand phonetics and punctuation. He attended parent-teacher conferences, blushing under the gazes of young mothers and a sympathetic classroom teacher. He learned to wash colored and white laundry separately, to forbid unsafe hairstyles, and to darn the tights that were quickly tearing on Ashley. As Ashley grew older, she realized the difference in her family. There were many incomplete families with single mothers, but she was the only one with a single father. Ashley found this offensive. I don't care. They're all stupid, her loyal friend Pamela would say from the stairwell. But Ashley couldn't just let it go. He's not a loner, he has me, she thought stubbornly. One evening, she sat across from her father and placed a chessboard between them. He looked at his daughter in surprise. I want you to teach me how to play, the 8-year-old girl said firmly. They played chess, checkers, bingo, and other games. They skied and skated, read books, listened to vinyl records on an old record player, made borscht, and then had fun cleaning the kitchen. And Ben had never been a single father. She was never an abandoned child. They had each other and were happy. After high school, Ashley went to university law school. She did well in her studies. At the defense of diplomas, there were representatives of companies looking for promising young staff. After the defense, a handsome young man in a great suit approached her and, holding out his business card, politely said, "Interesting work, Ashley. I'm referring to your topic, transportation security. It's close to us. If you need a job, come in for an interview. We'd be happy to. We don't have any openings right now, but we'll put you on the talent pool." Ashley twirled the business card in her hands and sighed happily. Well, there was already an invitation to work, but at least there was interest in her modest, unimportant person, but only to know who invites. She ran to her native department to the teacher who supervised her thesis project. He was a very experienced man and seemed to know all the firms in the city. "John Smith, please advise me." She looked at the business card, apparently somewhere for an interview. "Should I go?" "What do you think? Vega Transportation Company." Oh, you're in luck. Congratulations. It's a great company. The owner's an interesting guy, a nugget from the 90s, so to speak. You know, the kind of guy who does everything himself. And the most amazing thing is that he never even went to jail. John Smith was expressively silent. Well, although as far as I know, they tried to sit him down. Anyway, you should go. I will, Ashley said. The first visit to the Vega office had stunned Ashley. It was like something she'd seen many times in American movies, a huge light-colored building with glass walls that seemed to be divided into offices and areas. In reality, everyone worked in one spacious room. Ashley realized later that the division into departments, services, and levels of management was done in stages, and the higher the floor, the higher the level of those working on it. The legal department, where she could get to work if she was lucky, was almost on Olympus on the 7th floor of the office building. "Who's on the 8th?" she asked, counting by the buttons on the elevator. "There are only 8 floors." Management, the clerk who was escorting her to the interview site, awe-inspiringly informed her, heads of service, deputies, and Jennifer Anderson herself. The last name itself was pronounced with such reverence that Ashley couldn't stand it and laughed. The guy looked at her sternly and perplexed, waved his hand toward the open door, and muttered, "Wait, there now will come from the personnel department," and ran down the corridor, with his whole figure expressing his firm intention to work long and diligently to someday still get the great honor and step at least briefly on the sacred tiles of the 8th floor. She walked into the empty office and sat down at the large conference table. Obviously, she should have waited. Someone walked past the office, came back, and peered into the office. "Hello, are you expecting someone?" A pleasant, low male voice brought her out of her reverie. On the threshold of the office stood a tall, broad-shouldered man. Gray hair, noticeable deep wrinkles and hands gave away his age, obviously well over 50. But his head posture, and the sense of vigor that radiated from him seemed to refute the information about his age. The suit the man was wearing was a bit old-fashioned in style, but fit the statuesque figure magnificently. What a man, Ashley thought with involuntary admiration. "Mademoiselle, I beg your pardon, but I asked you a question," she heard. The man stood at the table with his hands behind his back and looked at her sternly. "Excuse me, I've been thinking," Ashley said. "About what?" I wondered. "Your suit," she blurted. "About what?" The look of amazement on his face. "Well, the suit," she mumbled, beginning to feel embarrassed. But she raised her head stubbornly and smiled. "It fits you beautifully. You don't see it very often." The man looked at her with interest, stepped into the office, and sat down across from her. "You're probably on a job interview. Could you tell me your name and what position you're applying for?" "My name is Ashley. I'm not applying for anything yet. I'd love to be a legal secretary. Although I've been told that there are no vacancies here and I could be put in the pool." She looked into the eyes of the man sitting across from her. "So you're a lawyer? That's good. Well, let's check it out. What else do you know about besides suits? I'd like your professional opinion. Well, at least about this document." He placed several stapled pieces of paper in front of her. Ashley took a deep breath and held the documents in her hands. It was a standard contract for the transportation of goods by road, and there were the standard mistakes that are made more from inattention or lack of time than from ignorance of very basic things. Cargo transportation is regulated not by Chapter 50 of the Civil Code, but by Chapter 40. There is no specific amount of penalty for late payment for transportation by the customer. But the word insurmountable is spelled with an E, not with an I. "I guess that's it." She shrugged her shoulders, put the contract on the table, and looked at her interlocutor. "Well," he said after a long pause, "if you want to work for us, you can start tomorrow." "But you don't have a vacancy." Ashley wondered. "You know, I have a feeling there will be," he said as he quickly wrote something down on a small sheet of paper. "Take this and go straight down the hall. That's where the personnel office is located. Ask for the manager and give him this." He handed Ashley something that looked like a note, which consisted of a few words and ended with a pretty clipping and a signature. "Are you the supervisor?" She couldn't resist looking at the confident posture. Well, I have some relation to the management of the company," he answered. And you were probably from the 8th floor. Yes, I'm there sometimes, she said. As she left the office, Ashley heard behind her. Susan, would you ask Thomas from sales to join me, please, she said. No, I'm not in my office, I'm in the conference room. What's the interview? It's already over, don't worry. Yeah, I did it myself. For some reason, Ashley felt sorry for Thomas, who she didn't know. There was something in the older man's voice that didn't bode well for Thomas. Well, looks like I've set someone up, she thought. On the other hand, the mistakes in the contract are childish, and such a solid firm. She's good, isn't she? What a lawyer. She didn't even ask who she was talking to. Maybe it's the local lunatic. In a great suit. It would be a laugh if they told her to shove that note somewhere else. But after a few minutes, she realized that she had unknowingly been talking to someone very important. The head of personnel, a tall, statuesque woman, looked at the note and turned a frightened look on Ashley. Are you from John Smith? She said in a shaky voice. Hello, please come in. I don't know any John Smith, and this is obviously the man who spoke to me. He didn't introduce himself. For some reason, I didn't ask him to. Oh, come on. You spoke to Mr. Smith himself? We don't even know that. That's John Smith, the owner and CEO of our company. That's how Ashley ended up at Vega as contract counsel. The job was interesting and challenging. The salary, the decent people around her suited her well as a coworker. She was quickly drawn into the daily routine work of a large office, and life rolled on a quiet scenario. The miracles began when Mr. Smith suddenly appeared in their large office. After talking to one of the specialists, he suddenly stopped at Ashley's desk. What's up? How are you settling in? He stepped closer and winked discreetly. How do I look today? He asked in a whisper. It's okay, it's a nice suit. Ashley looked at him in amazement and gave him a discreet thumbs up, smiling. How do you know the boss personally? Victoria, who was sitting at the next table, couldn't resist her curiosity. He hired me, Ashley shrugged. It was an accident. What a coincidence. The neighbor whispered excitedly. You know, you should take advantage of accidents like that. It could be the only chance you ever get. What are you talking about? Ashley looked at her in confusion. But are you stupid or something? The girl's eyes widened. The Smiths. They're such a family. You have no idea how much they have. By the way, the boss's son Jake works here. Yeah, he's a lawyer. Just a lawyer? Ashley was surprised. She wasn't interested in gossip about the family and wealth of the firm's owners. But the fact that the business owner's son worked in a lowly position surprised her. Ashley couldn't believe her eyes. The people posing as Democrats were just playing roles to show they were principled. They even kept their own son behind bars as if he were a criminal. The girl was clearly overreacting, and Ashley hurried to end the conversation. So Jake Smith, whom she'd come in contact with several times for work, wasn't just a namesake or even a poor relative of the principal, as she'd thought, but his own son. That's right, he had the middle name John. What a family. None of her business, though. Ashley was in regular contact with Jake. They sat in neighboring offices, worked in the same area, and often exchanged information, data, and documents. Jake gave the impression of a very reserved person, keeping a serious distance from everyone in the office. Given his background, it was understandable. The other employees had long since gotten used to him. The constant presence of the boss's son didn't cause any discomfort, but there was no panache either. Jake was even-tempered, polite, and seemed very lonely. He seemed to be in a constant state of unhappy reflection. He did his work responsibly, but mechanically, without interest. Ashley wondered to herself, how could it be? He was the heir. He should be passionate about this business, worried about it, interested in every detail. After all, he was the future owner of the company, and he acted as if he got here from the labor exchange. And most importantly, it was exactly the job he'd been assigned. Jake acted like a hired man, a stranger to the company. He never took initiative, never sought to make decisions or take responsibility. Jake's behavior was as if he didn't care what would happen to the firm tomorrow. 6 months after Ashley started working at Vega, Jake didn't show up for work. He was rumored to have broken his leg, Compound fracture. Will be laid up for at least a month. I wish I could lie down in a place like this. I'd settle for anything. Stated a local gossip columnist always aware of office news. A couple days later, Jake Smith called Ashley. Ashley. Hi, you may have heard that I've had an accident. I'm lying here and I feel like I'm going to have nothing to do. I thought I'd get some work done, but then I realized I had no papers. Could you bring me something? Ashley marveled. Just please don't take offense. I'm not brazen enough to use you as a courier. But I wouldn't want an unauthorized courier or driver touching my papers, even if they are trusted people. You see, it's confidential information after all. I can be trusted. What if I'm just waiting for an opportunity to peek at your papers, she said jokingly. You're the one I trust, he said firmly. I can't send you the documents you need electronically. Like wasting precious time and dragging herself to an unknown place for the sake of a few papers, even very much needed by the director's son, somehow didn't make her smile. Yes, of course. But you see, there's my diary with the necessary entries. Perhaps I need it most of all, and just like that, he became sad. Okay, sorry, the hell with it. I'll make do with those papers. Suddenly, she felt ashamed. A man was lying with a fracture. He called, asked for help, and she would take him out on the bumps. She was an indispensable businesswoman, too. And then Jake could hardly mean a trip on public transportation. All right, I'll bring everything, she decided. But how am I going to get to you? I have no idea where I'm going or how I'm going to get there. Oh, don't worry about that. I'll send a car for you right away. There was such relief in his voice that she felt ashamed again, that she had almost refused him. An hour later, the car was pulling up to the Anderson mansion. But there was something to see here. It wasn't a huge, gaudy house that both amazed and destroyed the imagination. Behind the cast-iron fence was a large yet elegant white brick building with huge windows that somehow seemed to float above the emerald lawns around the house. Ashley sighed admiringly. There were gorgeous roses growing around the house and clear hydrangea bushes that looked like huge balloons. Everything around it certainly spoke of serious affluence, but there was nothing garish or pompous about it. Certainly there was nothing wrong with the Anderson family's taste. She was escorted deep into the house, up to the second floor, to a large room on a special bed with an extraction device. Lying there was Jake with a cast across his thigh. His leg was lifted up on a special scale. He was gaunt, pale, and as usual, his face, with its overgrown stubble, had a quiet expression of boredom and indifference. At the sight of Ashley entering, however, he perked up a bit and even faked a smile. Here's everything you asked for, she handed Jake a weighty package. He opened it immediately, pulled out a small, beige leather-covered day planner, and for some reason shoved it under his pillow. Ashley thought he exhaled a sigh of relief as he did so. Thank you, Jake said. You have no idea how much you've helped me, Ashley. Oh, it's nothing, she brushed it off. Just dropped off some papers. But I skipped work and got a chance to admire your marvelous roses. Its mother, Jake, grinned. She's got a little twinge on those roses. Fiddles with them all day long, looking for scratches on her hands, fiddling with the roses. Your mom herself, Ashley, couldn't believe that the wife of someone as wealthy as Anderson was taking care of the flowers herself. For some reason, she thought such ladies sat in spas and hand spas around the clock, with a personal handyman around each nail responsible for that particular part of the limb. I have unusual parents from every angle, especially my mom. Jake smirked again. It seemed to Ashley that the expression on the man's face wasn't quite right for a conversation about his favorite parents. She'd gotten into something she didn't need to. She said out loud, "Well, Jake's getting better." Ashley got up from the chair she'd been sitting in all this time. "Ashley, sit with me for a moment. If you have time, please," he said suddenly. At that, Jake seemed so abandoned, so lonely and unhappy that she almost burst into tears. He'll come to his senses. You miserable fool, Ashley twitched herself. He's the son of a multi-millionaire, almost the owner of a huge firm. You're standing in the middle of a huge house that you've only seen on TV, and you're going to feel sorry for him? No, Ashley, there's something wrong with your head. It's kind of a day, and everyone's gone, and I'm just lying here all alone, he smiled. Well, Jake, is there no one to visit you? Ashley asked jokingly to keep the conversation going. No one, Jake sighed. That's the trouble with all the rich kids who went to school in other countries. And in my case, on another continent. All my friends are far away, and here it's just the close ones. He suddenly grinned crookedly. And in general, people like to be friends with heirs. And I'm just a second prince. Ashley didn't understand much of this strange muttering. Only the ironic word rich, which he used to refer to himself, hurt his ears. But how rich are you, Jake Jonovich? You work. And you're a good man, she said. He looked at her interestedly. You're lying. Sure, he sighed, but it's still nice. No one's ever called me a good person before. Look, Ashley, why don't we switch to you? It's kind of silly. I'm lying here in my pajamas, and you're yelling at me. And let's do it, she agreed, glad that she was able to shake him up a little. But only here, and only while you're sick. Jake started talking cheerful. They suddenly found common topics of conversation. In general, Jake Anderson, who was not immersed in his own thoughts, turned out to be a sociable, witty, and interesting conversationalist. He read a lot, was erudite, and most importantly, had time to travel the world, live in several countries. Ashley, for whom her knowledge of the world had been limited to her hometown, except for a few trips to the sea with her father when she was a child, found it all like stories about another galaxy. Jake, seeing that he was being listened to with unprecedented interest, even delight, had gotten into the mood and was relentlessly telling tales of his student life abroad, cleverly weaving in the names of places of interest. They did not notice that it was beginning to get dark outside the large window overlooking the garden. Oh, how am I going to get home? Ashley realized. Don't worry, they'll take you home, Jake promised and called the driver. Well, thank you. It was interesting, she said sincerely. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe now I won't be surprised. At least not until tomorrow. Listen, he exclaimed, as if he had suddenly had an idea. Come again. Just like that, without any paperwork, out of simple human compassion. I don't think that's a good idea, Ashley glared at him insistently. It's uncomfortable. I wouldn't want anyone in the company to know anything. I swear to you, he returned his usual frown. I don't want any gossip myself. I don't really care what anyone thinks of me. But I'd like to keep you out of it. Well, I'll try to visit you again. I promise, she said. Ashley reached out and took Jake's hand in hers and felt it shake firmly. Will I wait? She heard in the back of her mind. She had very strange impressions of this trip. On the one hand, Jake wasn't the boring bore she'd imagined him to be when she'd met him at work, but he seemed interested in her. At least for her sake, he'd shed his bored air to the Empire and become a normal human being. On the other hand, there was such a huge gap between them that she didn't even want to think about any relationship other than a purely business one. In fact, it all seemed to be the whim of a bored major, as Jake called himself. Ashley put it all out of her mind and plunged into work and thinking about something very important, what to get her father for his birthday. A few days later, Jake called her again. Hello, Ashley. He addressed her formally. I wanted to remind you of the commitment you made. She took a regretful glance at the phone and held it to her ear again. What commitments, Jake? What are you talking about? But hello, and the promise to visit me? He asked. I didn't promise anything, Jake. I said I'd try, she said, surprised and frankly confused by the sudden call. Well, please try, he pleaded. I'm begging you. Otherwise, I'll just die of boredom. All right, she said doomedly, glancing at the calendar hanging on the wall. Tomorrow was Saturday, and she had other plans. But after all, there is basic compassion for human beings. If I arrive tomorrow at 3 o'clock, will you be home? She asked, and only a few moments later she realized what a stupid thing she had said. There was laughter in the receiver. It was the first time she'd ever heard Jake laugh. You know, I probably will. So come on over. I'll be waiting, he said, stopping laughing. Ashley arrived at the house the next day. She walked up to the second floor, above the rose bushes at the entrance, and sighed in admiration. Jake was still lying in the same pose, but it turned out he was a different person. He was wearing a white shirt, his face was clean-shaven, and his hair, which had hung down in untidy icicles over his face the last time they'd met, was shiny and had clearly been combed with a special product. Jake smiled and held out his hand to Ashley. So that's who Jake was dressed up for today. I wondered what the parade was all about. Did he shave? You're finally coming in handy, she said. A very beautiful woman with her eyes slightly lined with makeup, carrying her beautiful head, entered the room. The Countess' mother has come to see her son, Countess Chick Jake said with a chuckle. Don't give us titles of nobility, son. We don't have any. We're simple people, not without our faults. And our main flaw is that we're rich. But we fight against it, said the woman, looking at Ashley with marvelous velvet eyes. There she is, the famous Madame Anderson, the one who is still the stuff of legends in the office, Ashley thought. But the staff gossipers weren't exaggerating when they talked about her beauty and her power over people. And she got that power without any effort at all. She was just something to listen to, something to look at. And Ashley was looking at her like a rabbit at a boa constrictor. You've been surprisingly rude since the accident, the woman poked. Jake, are you introducing us, or do we have to do without you? Introductions. Ashley. My mother, Jennifer Anderson, in person. Mom, this is Ashley, our company lawyer. My dad just hired her himself. If she could, Jake added. Ashley would probably do a curtsy, Jennifer summarized. Wait, Jennifer said, as if remembering something. Did you compliment my husband on his suit? He was telling me how at your interview you discussed his appearance. Well, Jennifer, John Smith is a bit of an exaggerator. I just couldn't help but admire the way his jacket fit. I mean, it's really very nice. Girls, that's a compliment. They're from my old catcher. If you only knew, Ashley, how long and painful it took me to get him out of the colored leggings. She rolled her eyes and shook her head playfully. Thank you. You tell your mom about the roses, too. Well admired. She's going to float, said Jake from his seat. All in all, the day went wonderfully. They drank tea on the veranda, and the conversation, skillfully conducted by Jennifer Anderson, was not at all tiresome. Ashley. At that, she realized with amazement that Jake's mother now knew practically everything about her. Who's going to work in security, Ashley thought. Then they played a game of chess with Jake. Ashley beat him in 10 moves and left the sick man unusually thoughtful and went home. Come and visit us, we'd be delighted, Jennifer Anderson said as she said goodbye. And somehow Ashley didn't have the slightest doubt about the sincerity of those words. Jake recovered, and limping a little, went to work. A short time later, the office was stunned by the startling news that Jake Anderson was openly courting Ashley, the new girl in the legal department. You're a piece of work, Victoria, her office neighbor said in a long voice, pretending to be an innocent sheep, knowing no one, knowing nothing. From hello, Ashley shrugged and walked out of the office. Jake, she looked at him very seriously. Why are you doing this? I have to leave the company now. I just won't be able to work here. Do you think I can stand all the smirks and nasty smiles directed at me? There won't be any smirks and smiles directed at you. Everyone will shut up, he pronounced. Will shut up right after you marry me. That's such a proposition. Shocked, she asked. Yes, he finally looked a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, it was supposed to look more romantic than so solemn. Well, since it did, and I want to ask, will you marry me? No, of course not, she exclaimed and cried. A few days later, Ashley and Jake were sitting in the living room of the Anderson house. Across from them sat Jennifer Anderson. Next to her, excitedly placed John Smith. Ashley, I apologize for the form in which the proposal was made to you, Jennifer spoke. Believe me, it's from excitement. But it's not the form that matters, it's the content. I'm asking you, or rather she looked back at her husband, we're asking you to accept Jake's proposal. What Ashley stared at the woman. But I was sure. I thought that I would be against you, Jennifer Anderson finished her thought. And why, in fact, should I be against you? Because you don't belong to the so-called golden youth? Well, I never belonged to it either. I was a plain and happy student. Then I married a cheekily handsome guy. And we were happy, working like two horses. And then bad luck happened to us. She grinned. We got rich, you see. And as for the golden youth, Anderson continued, the gold is of rather dubious quality. A samovar, as they say. But you, Ashley, it seems to me to be of high, pure metal. Will you forgive me for being so cavalier?" John Smith could not endure it, and jumping up from his chair, where he was held only by his wife's menacing glance, rushed for the champagne. "Are you sure this is what you want?" her father asked. "Do you love him?" "Yes, I do," she replied. "And you don't pass off pity as love?" The father looked at his daughter carefully. "Dad, I want to be with this man." That's all she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around her father's neck and not seeing him shake his head slightly, visibly and incredulously. Memories of her journey into the Anderson family flashed by in a few moments, and Ashley returned to the party. Jake was still nowhere to be seen among the guests. Jake had become strange. He was always disappearing lately, with endless things to do. He himself had become nervous, irritable. He looks terrible. And here, against the backdrop of a blooming father and mother, it's especially noticeable. Amber apparently managed to calm down a little the children, who were no longer 3, but 4, and studying under Mary's feet. She looked back down the highway, tortured, and finally saw Ashley and waved hello to her. Across the lawn, Amber's husband was walking toward them, shoving several canapes at a rapid pace. Almost without stopping, he hoisted little Anthony onto one shoulder and Mary onto the other, and something joyously ran across the grass. Following, oblivious in 2 voices, the twins carried on. Taking into account the squealing of the children, all this merry company made such a noise that a whole tribe of Indians would not have made. Looking at the shrieking crowd shyly walking across the lawn, the guests behaved with dignity. Jennifer Anderson smiled contentedly. "Well, finally," she said. "At least someone's having fun. By the way, Ashley, where's your father? He got my invitation, by the way, and was kind enough to say he'd be there." "If my dad promised, he'll be there," Ashley said confidently. "Unless, of course, something happens at the factory." And yes, there he was. She watched her father step nervously but confidently across the lawn, and noted to herself that he looked as good as most of the men in the room. It was only the bouquet in his hands, which clearly exceeded the limit, that caused concern. "Ah, my knight," exclaimed the Jubilee, rising to meet Ben Anderson. "You have broken out to me after all, you sloth. And how well, perhaps, I shall leave my nouveau riche husband and attend to this young engineer." "Don't worry," she added in a whisper, as always effortlessly reading her father's thoughts. "I will accept any bouquet. I don't doubt his sincerity." Leaving her mother-in-law and father to pour compliments and jokes on each other, she went to look for her husband. Besides, she had a sudden urge to pee. Ashley took quick steps toward the house. The large hallway greeted her with coolness and silence, especially pleasant after the constant buzz of voices, loud laughter, and music. She and Jake had lived in a city apartment a long time ago, and she hadn't been in this house much. She remembered the guest bathrooms, though, located somewhere under the huge staircase. As she crept deeper into the house, she stared at several identical doors leading out into the hallway. "What's with all the charades?" She cheered up. "Where am I going?" "Lovely letters." With a wave of her hand, she pushed open the nearest door and peered inside. It definitely wasn't a restroom. It looked like a place to store cleaning supplies. Huge racks with dozens of jars, boxes, and vials partitioned the room in 2. Suddenly, she heard sounds like a muffled conversation in the back of the room. It's embarrassing, she thought, and then she wanted to close the door quietly behind her. Suddenly, her hearing was cut by an unusual-sounding but familiar word, transaero. This strange word was the name of the company, which for many years was the main competitor of the company Vega. But lately it had become strangely quiet, slowed down, as if it was going to leave the transportation market. "Oh yeah, keep your pocket wide open." Anderson SR grinned. "They're up to no good." Both nodded. "To hell with it. The main thing is to win the tender for transportation of steel structures for the new plant. And then I can go on a well-deserved vacation. I don't like this lull, and right before the tender bidding. It's like an ambush. Who would discuss business that involves a competitor in a whisper in the back room of an empty house? Ashley's palms grew cold and clammy with sweat. She cautiously approached, completely hidden by the shelving, and the human voices immediately became clearer and louder. Though they spoke in an obvious effort to muffle the sounds, she strained her hearing and began to distinguish words and phrases. Transero is in huge debt, and these are the tenders your father is targeting. My only hope is to get you off my back, so I need information. The man's voice minted the words despite being forced to whisper. But I've already given you everything you asked for. Our entire client base, the answering voice sounded pathetic, humiliated, begging, and somehow sounded very familiar to Ashley. I don't need the names of companies or phone numbers from our client base. Don't take me for a fool. I can get those numbers from the phone book. His voice sounded irritated and angry. I need the information we talked about last time. Terms of transportation, the nature of the shipments, actual rates, information about your special discounts, and not just what's in the contracts. Ashley felt as if her heart had stopped, and then it thudded and beat fast and fast so hard that she was frightened. She thought that rumble was about to be heard. The voice belonged to Jake Anderson. There was no doubt about that, and as if on purpose for her, she heard it. You know, Mr. Anderson, it's your trouble to have to hide out here among the rags. I had to come and bother your mother with my congratulations. I mean, she can't stand me, never could. Mind you, the tender is 15 days away. If I don't get some real information about your dealings, it will all become meaningless. I don't understand. Jake's voice shook and trailed off. Why? All the information. And you must really be a dumbass, as they say. His interlocutor grinned. I must deal with your father and his offspring once and for all. Aren't you tired of picking up the crumbs after him? I want it all. If I put information about your dealings out in the open, your father won't get another businessman in this world to lay a hand on him. Don't you understand that? But look, you've completely destroyed us. Jake sounded like he was about to cry. Look, I can't, you know. Mr. Anderson, you're in no position to bargain. If you say A, you say B. What the hell does it matter how much and what kind of information you sold me? Come on, come on. You know the saying, 8 woes, 1 answer. Give me some time, came Jake's snapping voice. How much, came the clear question. How much time do you need? 10 days, mumbled Jake. Too long, his interlocutor replied sternly. A week. But that's impossible. Jake was apparently so frightened that he forgot all about conspiracy and shrieked. But then he regained his composure and whispered, swallowing the words, Don't you realize the data you're talking about isn't data from the contracts? We'll have to get my father's records to get into his correspondence somehow. And then, a lot of things are not on paper, but in his head. It's going to take time to get it all. We've already discussed time. We're not going to revisit this issue. The man was obviously determined to finish Jake off, and he was persistent in his efforts. About the means. Do you think you should have done all this a long time ago? Especially considering the money you got for it. What good is that money to me? I haven't had it for a long time. You know that. You must realize. Quiet, Mr. Anderson. Your personal problems don't interest me in the slightest. Speaking of personal, you have an adorable little girl and a very nice wife. You wouldn't want anything unpleasant to happen to them, would you? Ashley felt suddenly very sick. She felt like she was going to faint. Without thinking, she grabbed onto the shelving unit and stayed on her feet. Fortunately, the sturdy rack of household supplies had been made and secured to last, like everything else in the Anderson house. No, please, Jake shrieked. I'll do everything, please. Don't touch Ashley and Mary. Not them, better than me. I'll do anything, only as my father never really trusted me much. You know, I've always been in the firm, not even second, but third rate. I was never really interested in true client relations. How I explain my sudden interest to my father is no longer my problem. Mr. Anderson, do you think he'll believe it? Well, I don't know. To portray a dramatic mental break, a redefinition of self, family values. I don't know. Explain that you've suddenly realized how important it is for you to share a common cause with your father together, after all. Look, I'm sick of you guys. Maybe I should just walk up to your parent myself and honestly say, you know, John, let's do this. I need some information here, you give it to me. Ashley never told anybody anything about your son Jake. What could he possibly have done? Shut up. There's a new note in Jake's voice all of a sudden. No, it wasn't strong-willed. It was more like the desperation of a hunted animal. Shut up. Do you hear me? Get out of here. Get out of here. He rudely kicked the guest out of the house. But that's all right. I'm not touchy. I expect a call from you tomorrow, as usual, with a report. And give my best wishes to your charming mother. I'll allow myself to leave in English without saying goodbye. Jennifer, run-of-the-mill hearts. Ashley squeezed herself into the dark corner the wall formed and held her breath. She was able to get a good look at the man who walked by, and a hunch turned into a certainty. It was the owner of the Transero company. He walked out of the back room, carefully covering the door behind him. Ashley got up from the cards, took a few deep breaths, and moved deeper into the room. Jake was sitting against the wall in exactly the same position Ashley herself had just struggled to get out of. He was squatting on his knees, hugging himself tightly to his knees. His face was the color of a sheet of gray paper. Drops of sweat covered his forehead and temples. He raised his eyes and looked at his wife. Jake, I heard everything Ashley said. He didn't even seem surprised by what she'd said. Or maybe he was too tired to show any more emotion. Ashley walked over to her husband and sat down next to him on the floor. They were silent for a long time, as if each was afraid to be the first to break the silence. Why? She finally asked. Why? Jake asked in a whisper. Suddenly he burst into tears. He jumped up, standing in front of her with a shaking chin and clenched hands. He was scary, and Jake started to scream. Why? Because I hate you all, my mother, my father, my sisters, my brother, you. I hate you all. Nobody ever gave a damn about me. No one ever did. My parents even had replacements for me. What was Anthony for? Why did I have to be the laughingstock of everyone? I wish I was dead. It was real, full-blown hysteria. Ashley didn't know what to do in such situations, how to help a person. Suddenly, she did something purely intuitive. She straightened up and slapped Jake with a swift, hard slap that sounded like a shot of shock in the small space. Or from the sound, or all together. Jake suddenly fell silent and shrank back. Yeah, I guess you'd rather be dead, Jake, than betray your family. Tell me everything, Jake, and together we'll figure out how we can save ourselves. We, he asked in a whisper. We, she said firmly. He'd started gambling a couple years ago, convincing himself that his father would never let him near the family business, and that everything would be handed over to Anthony when he grew up. Jake began looking for a way to get rich and rub his father's nose in it. Soon the game became an addiction. He turned out to be a sick man. Ashley is amazed to learn that the apartment they live in has long been mortgaged. The car that Jake had supposedly put in for repairs had been sold. Almost all of the valuables in the safety deposit box had also been sold. He started borrowing, reborrowing, took out several loans, and became completely confused. And then a modest, inconspicuous man with no special features approached him and offered a meeting with a person interested in solving his, Jake's, problems. It was the owner of Transero. After a month, Jake was hooked, and then he was offered to do something Ashley already had a good idea about. You realize I have no way out, he raised his unseeing eyes to her. I'm scum. I'm guilty in front of all of you. I love you so much, but I don't even have the right to breathe the same air as you. She stared at him pitiful, tortured, shaking with terror and self-loathing, and tried to figure out what she felt for him. Anger, disgust, revulsion, disgust, pity, no and no. And let no one believe her, because she doesn't believe even herself right now. But she loves this weak, pathetic, confused man. Ashley looked at him with sympathy, even though he was reckless. She didn't care what was right or wrong. She walked over to him, put her arms around his head, and pulled him against her. They sat like that for a long time, until finally Jake spoke. I've got it all figured out. It's so simple. God, it's so incredibly simple. And I'd been looking for a way out for so long. And he was right there. I have to go to my father and tell him everything. Everything from the beginning to the end. I have to do it myself. Not you, not anyone else. Just me. I'll be a scum and a liar, and a sick man, and a traitor to them. I may break my parents' hearts forever, but I will still be their son, a bad son, a lying, vile, despicable, mean son, but a son. A son who found the remnants of conscience and returned to them from the darkness. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, looked at Ashley and said, "It was you. You showed me this way out. If it wasn't for you, I would have kept going through my dad's papers and my mom's things. I'd be eavesdropping and hiding like a rat. Then I'd count the money with trembling hands. Thank you, my love. I never told you how much I love you. Ashley, if you stay with me after what I've done, I'll dedicate my life to you." "You have others to devote at least part of your life to," she said, taking his hand and standing up. "Let's go. We have a long journey ahead of us." Suspicious of her husband, Jane followed him to the sea. Jane tasted the newly cooked borscht, grimaced, and irritably threw the spoon into the sink. She'd oversalted it again, and the flavor is disgusting, cloying, as if it were not soup, but compote with vegetables. "I feel like I'm starting to get turned on." Jane poured herself some tea, sat in a corner and stared at one point. The oversalted, sugary soup, which could only appeal to a lover of Asian cuisine, was just one more touch to the ridiculous day. Things had gone downhill from the very first morning. It started with her waking up at the crack of dawn, even though she could have slept for another 3 hours. Today it was especially annoying because it was the beginning of vacation, and there was no reason to get up at 6:30 in the morning. Besides, it was a strange peculiarity of her body that once she woke up in the middle of the night, she could never go back to sleep, no matter how hard she tried. So she spent the rest of the night lying motionless on her side of the bed, afraid of waking Jason, watching the beams of light from the car headlights moving across the ceiling with her eyes. After struggling until dawn, Jane crawled out of bed, in a state far from morning vigor, of course. She scattered a jar of cream in the bathroom, broke a fingernail, and as a crowning achievement, burned an ugly hole in her still quite decent blouse. At the sight of the wrinkled fabric, Jane honestly tried to answer herself why had she taken to ironing a blouse that was completely unnecessary now. There was no answer. Spoiled, of course, of the few things that really suited her. Having tried to negotiate with the universe by cooking borscht, which her husband Jason always called a masterpiece of cooking, and having received instead of a noble taste some brackish concoction, Jane finally realized that today was definitely not her day. There were a frightening number of days like this in her life when things didn't work out. It was time to get to the bottom of this. Sitting in her cozy little kitchen, she realized that it wasn't the carrots and beets or the old iron with the frayed heat markings. It was about her condition and mood, which were far from normal. Her thoughts habitually returned to her husband Jason. If one believes that a man plays every time he is remembered, Jason must do so continuously. For days now, she hasn't thought about anything but him and her place in his life. If, of course, she still had any place in it. Jane had strong doubts about the latter, unsupported by facts, but somehow it seemed that the facts would not be long in coming. Jane sipped her tea and shook her head. What was there to beat around the bush? At least she could tell herself the truth: Jason was cheating on her. That was for sure. To be sure, she'd just have to stop sitting in her old robe on the couch, feeling sorry for herself and marveling at his meanness. Why wouldn't you be amazed? They'd been together for 10 years. It always seemed to her that their relationship was sincere and really strong. In any case, she loved her husband, worried about him, tried to be a good wife. What was worth her feat of cooking alone? She spent years desperately injuring her fingers, once nearly lost her little finger trying to carve a chicken. She cursed the stupid human habit of eating every day, and several times. And she stocked up on food, periodically clogging the kitchen drain. It wasn't easy for her, but she succeeded. She had gone from being an inept potato masher who crumbled potatoes rather than peeled them to a master of soups and roasts in 8 years. Well, maybe not quite a master, if you're realistic. But she learned, she could, she achieved, she suffered. And then one day I heard from Jason. "Jane, this is a masterpiece. Borscht. It's just like my mom's. It's even better." Because they had so many things in those almost 10 years, the good and the not so good, the sad and the funny. They really were truly together in both the joyful moments and the hard ones. Hadn't she been by Jason's side during the terrible time when his best friend, the one Jason had been friends with since childhood and thought of as a brother, had died, and he couldn't recover from the shock? Or when he'd had a fight with his boss and quit, finding himself unemployed in an instant? With a mortgage, by the way. Did she, Jane, say a word of reproach? No, she understood. She supported him. Though she'd had a few thoughts that Jason could have been less principled and kept silent where necessary. And when his inability to do anything around the house came to light, had she ever rebuked him for it? But she could. Yes, she could. Especially in the face of her own culinary successes. Jason really was a poor handyman for some reason. Although he was sincerely trying to improve. He was eager to repair appliances, clean drains, hang shelves. But after a few experiments, some of which ended in minor injuries for the master, Jane firmly decided that if there was a need to do something at home, we'll call plumbers, electricians, and furniture makers. She cares for Jason in and of itself. In fact, Jason was a virtuoso at one thing around the house. He was an excellent knife sharpener, and that talent was enough for Jane to consider her husband useful in the household. And Jason. Could she ever forget the way he had cared for her when she had slipped on the ice in the early spring and broken her leg? How much care and love had been poured into her then? No less than the fruit, seafood, nuts, and other things she'd bought. What Jason had rushed to buy and shove at Jane after learning that his beloved wife was prone to fractures. How he's hated cottage cheese since childhood, manfully eating it with her for company, feigning bliss on his face. And certainly never forget how, upon waking up on March 8th, she found her annoying cast solidly painted with daisies. They were the best flowers she had ever received in her life, and they were not overshadowed even by the incredible size of a bouquet of some unseen exotic buds. And the one thing that's still hard to remember. Their dreams of children, and then at least a child. All the more everyone around them had children, one or two. Her high school friend Mary had 3, and in her favorite TV shows everyone was fertile. And from episode to episode they were relentlessly procreating. She and Jason were the only ones who weren't doing so well. And when it suddenly became clear that she couldn't have children, or at least not in the usual way, it seemed to her that her life was over, and certainly nothing good would ever come of it again. Who better than Jason had been there for her, listening to her tantrums every second, calming her down and leading her by the hand out of the gloom she found herself in. "Are you going to leave me now?" she asked then, looking away. "Why should I?" he wondered. "Or have you found a good reason to get rid of me?" "Look, stop it. I'm serious. Why would you tie yourself to a barren woman like me?" She grinned bitterly. "I don't know. I need to think." Jason looked at her seriously. "I need to make a list of your faults and your virtues and see which is greater, and then decide." "Oh, well, it's already done." He pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket and stared at it carefully. "Well, it's a lot of faults for one man. But you know, there's one thing that outweighs them all. I love you, kid." "Well, there's a lot of other ways to do it. We'll get ready and try. At the very least, adopt." How she loved him in that moment. How do you forget the day they bought that big, expensive couch, and only after it was unloaded near the house, suddenly realized that this monster, a masterpiece of furniture craftsmanship, categorically, under no conditions and ways does not enter the doors of their driveway. To return the sofa to the store, Jason categorically refused, stating that it was a matter of honor. Either he would defeat the couch or the couch would defeat him. And they sat in front of the amazed passers-by and neighbors in front of the driveway on their purchase, embraced, waiting for some miracle, a master, able to disassemble the purchase without damage, to drag it, finally, into the apartment. And it was one of the best evenings of their lives. Then it was one of the best nights. And another night was their first New Year's Eve as husband and wife. They were traveling by car to the country house of their friends for New Year's Eve, got completely lost in the snow-covered alleys of the old village, and finally stalled in some snowdrift. They discovered that it was a few minutes before 12. They took turns drinking champagne from the neck of the bottle, eating tangerines and looking into each other's eyes. Fluffy snowflakes quietly descended from the sky and fell on Jason's hair and shoulders, glistening on his hair. Their breath, smelling of tangerines, of wine, mingled in the frosty air. And it was the best, most fabulous night of Jane's life. Besides, right after 12, the real miracles began. The girl walking down the alley turned out to be both a good fairy and a witch. The first because she led them to the nearest house, full of people having fun, to warm themselves. And the witch because, laughing, she said that this village was called something completely different from the one they were traveling to. Soon came a slightly tipsy good wizard, who said that their car had almost turned into a pumpkin, at least as much use as they could get out of it for now. Then a whole series of transformations began, which resulted in Jane and Jason, wrapped in streamers and ribbons, being taken home in a semi-fainting state in the morning. Jason claimed that they had been taken in a sleigh pulled by a reindeer team. Jane, suffering from a terrible hangover, looked into Jason's cloudy eyes and believed even in reindeer. How many other moments could she remember that were so far away, almost forgotten, but as it turned out, carefully preserved by memory? And for the record, if anything, Jason wasn't the easiest and most unproblematic of husbands. He's got a way about him that if he were Jane, she'd have sent him away a long time ago. Take his passion for fishing and hunting. It would seem, how could a modern, quite prosperous and well-to-do man have such a passion for primitive activities? What kind of passion? To periodically break off and go to some wilderness, to sit for days in mud and water, to earn a cold, or to hook, if you are particularly lucky, a fish in one place. By the way, Jason's been lucky a couple times. And how much money is spent on these fun on spinning rods and other accessories. She'd seen for herself that it all cost Jason a lot of money when she decided to give him a real hunting bag with a nice name for his birthday. She even demanded the store to show her the best thing with the words, but only "let's not Chinese," that it should be made of genuine leather and branded. She, as they call it, played the game. When she looked at the price tag, she shuddered in surprise and, feeling the back of the mocking looks of the seller, proudly went to the cash register. Buying the game bag hadn't just consumed the entire amount she'd planned for the gift. It had wiped out her budget. Jane had been saving money for shoes. That problem was quickly solved when Jason simply bought her those shoes. The cost of the hunting equipment shocked her for a long time. But the worst part for her began if the hunt or fishing trip was successful and Jason came home with the spoils. In the hallway, scary, dirty, and unbearably smelly bags lay on the floor. The washing machine was humming, trying to deal with incredibly dirty clothes with traces of cash on them. Jane was simply afraid to go near it. After a while, she began to feel like a caveman's wife, covered in wet feathers with fish scales stuck to her feet. As a result of her torment, patience, and heroic struggle with fish and game, plates of pate or fried pieces of someone else's meat were proudly displayed on the table. "Try some," please pronounced the prey, and looked at her with rapturous eyes. Jane, totally unaccustomed to game, opened her mouth to refuse. But looking at the man she loved, his eyes full of pride and childish hope, she suddenly caught herself feeling as if she were about to offend a child. The tasting ended with her expressions of delight and his assurances that he would try to bring more next time. She was glad they didn't live in Africa, and Jason didn't bring home, for example, a part of an elephant carcass as a trophy. Though truth be told, she wasn't a gift either. Jason could probably use a good word for her passion for orchids, for example. She really loved those beautiful flowers, which for some reason reminded her of miniature alpine perpetual snowflakes. Jane had over 40 orchids in her home collection. And Jason bravely tolerated this neighborhood. Sometimes he had to literally take a queue to the bathroom, in which delicate and capricious flowers underwent water procedures. And he was not the first in the line. Usually after 2 or 3 months and several times of fertilizer use, Jason, an allergic man, would sneeze uncontrollably and deafeningly if he didn't get out of the house in time. And when he stumbled over another pot that suddenly appeared in front of him, he would freeze in fright. Almost weightless, very unstable orchid pots tipped over with surprising ease, and Jason didn't want to risk his life or his family's well-being by dropping a rare orchid from the windowsill, especially since those drops always left a trail of soil crumbs that he never managed to sweep up. Orchids, on the other hand, they stand quietly and peacefully in their places and do not scare anyone. What can't be said about her dear husband's other hobby? His obsession with hockey. This is not everyone cannot stand. Think about it. A well-mannered and polite, intelligent man, perfectly in control of himself, several times a year turns into a screaming, jumping and spewing curses and blessings abnormal. In the first year of their life together, Jane, it must be admitted, had barely made it to the end of the World Cup of hockey, which Jason watched, of course, on television, but he was yelling so loudly that it felt like they were in the middle of an overcrowded grandstand in their apartment. Ours, to Jane's secret joy, lost in the quarterfinals, and further games were played with less fan excitement. "How often is the World Cup played?" Jane asked cautiously. "Every year." Jason rubbed his hands together, "so we'll win it back next year." How foolish she'd been to think that his powerful instincts as a game catcher were the biggest problems in their married life. He'd go somewhere far away, and then there'd be a couple days of olfactory and visual torment at most. And everything would be fine again. For 2 weeks, the house had been a sports boom in the evenings. Jason jumped up and down on the couch, ran around the apartment, ate everything he could get his hands on. As it happened, the matches were broadcast mostly at night. And Jane had to share her husband's hockey enthusiasm. As you know, if you cannot overcome the situation, change your attitude to it. Realizing that hockey, unfortunately, was becoming more important to Jason than anything else, even her hobbies, she made the straw man decision to become a part of hockey, or rather a cheerleader. After thoroughly preparing herself, reading several articles, and studying the makeup of the U.S. national team, Jane sat down next to her nervous husband late one night. "Look, what's he doing? Look. That number 5 right there. That's Nathan. He's a defender, but he's trying to play left tackle. But now he's in Martin's way," she said in an authoritative tone, looking at her dazed husband. "Look, that's right. 100% of the goal was blown. If they play like that with some Slovaks, what will happen against the Canadians? We'll look ridiculous." Jason froze. Probably even if a flying object landed in front of him right now and a greenish alien came out of it, waving its tentacles, he wouldn't be more amazed. "You think?" He squeezed himself out. "Of course I do," Jane said authoritatively. "I think we should always put Martin in a 3-pronged attack with Zach and Zane. There are no other options. There's no need for unnecessary decisions." "I agree," Jason nodded, continuing to look at his wife as if she were an alien. He nodded respectfully, smiled uncertainly, and carefully moved the bowl of chips toward her. A few days later, they were jumping around on the couch and yelling like two crazy people. Jane was soon just as freaked out as Jason, counting the seconds until the final siren, cursing at refereeing errors, and eating so much junk food during the broadcast of the match that the next day she was horrified to realize how many days of continuous squatting it would take to burn off all those calories. How did they not die during the historic USA-Canada final, which our team won in the final minutes? We're left to wonder. The truth is, that night the entire vast country's heart first stopped, and then started beating at breakneck speed, spreading joy from the western to the eastern border. Basically, by finding herself drawn into the hockey madness against her will, Jane was able to get her revenge. And it started out exactly the same way she had with hockey. Only Jason wasn't shy about his attitude toward her new hobby. "Jane, I'm amazed. You're a smart woman. How can you even watch this crap?" he would exclaim when he saw another dark-haired character on the television screen with a piercing gaze and sharply defined lips. Jane loved to watch Turkish soap operas. They literally pulled her in. She loved everything in the marvelous landscapes, the glitter of the sea and bottomlessness of the southern sky, ancient city streets, luxury and beauty in everything. Even when they showed people who were supposedly poor in the story. Stunning, handsome actors, combining the beauty of Oriental princes and European sophistication, and most importantly, raging on the screen and literally spilling out of the TV passion and feelings of the heroes. "So what?" Jane answered very reasonably. "Offended by their idols. It's not bullshit. It's..." She spread her arms, trying to show the immensity of the phenomenon. "This is life." "Yes?" Jason asked snidely, sitting up next to her and staring at the screen. "Life? Well, let's see. For example, who is this?" "That's the main character. She's a poor girl, and her mother forces her to marry a rich man she doesn't love. She loves a poor man like herself. They've been friends since they were kids. Well, so she sits at home alone and pines." Jane rushed to bring Jason up to speed in a passionate and naive way. "She's sitting at home? Well, of course, in a 3-story villa with a swimming pool. You know, I wouldn't mind winning like that either. What's that around her neck? Jane. If you sold that boulder, you could live off it for the rest of your life. No husband necessary. Neither poor nor rich Jason laughed. "Oh, I can't, Jane. I can't, Jane. I mean, really, what's the point of watching this? You can stand and study. The poor thing is sitting at home, worrying, with heels higher than the Eiffel Tower on her feet. That's what I'm talking about." That's right. Now the poor childhood friend is coming over in a Ferrari. I gotta be ready for a dramatic scene. Or she'll run off, change clothes, and before he arrives, the fool will mutter from his entourage to himself and stare stubbornly at the TV. And yet Jason, regularly becoming an unwitting witness to yet another Turkish drama set against the backdrop of one of Turkey's seas, slowly became imbued with that world. One day Jane invited home two female friends she'd been friends with since high school. They were sitting in the kitchen, eating cake and talking about everything in the world. Of course, we couldn't help but talk about their favorite TV shows. "Oh, girls," sang one of them, dreamily turning her eyes. "I hear, while at home with the flu was sitting at home, watched Love Not Finished. Very interesting. They're my favorite Burak, still so cool and with a beard. It's just marvelous. How does it suit him?" "Is that Masha?" Jason's voice came into the kitchen. "Lady, I'll have another bottle of wine." "What kind of Burak is it?" "It's Burak, of course, but he's an actor, not himself. And Dinas is your school, Ravenki, and he's in all sorts of nonsense for snotty girls, but he's a very decent actor. And his movies are solid. The Magnificent Century, Osman. And then there's this one. What's his name, Jane? Well, where's your favorite plot? Rich Niche and Poor Chemo. What's that stupid title in our favorite style? Oh, Black Love. By the way, I never realized why it was black and not blue or green." The women in the kitchen sighed in agreement and admiration. Jason, cursing himself for his long tongue, red as a cancer, flew out of the kitchen. That's how they lived. Jane cheered for the hockey team, ate roasted meat and bones, game, river fish, and made soups. Jason fought with household chores and glanced obliquely at the Turkish passions on the screen, dodging the new orchids that suddenly appeared in front of him, devouring with pleasure, including the hated cottage cheese. They did all this, of course, for each other's sake, but with pleasure. Jane, staring at a photograph hanging on the wall in a frame. The picture was taken when neither Jane nor Jason saw that they were being photographed. Jason had both arms around her and was kissing her neck. She, turning half-turned toward the camera, was laughing. It was one of the best images of them together. Jane herself stared at the photo for a long time, trying to understand where this feeling of tenderness and togetherness came from. Yes, of course, it was immediately obvious that these two were happy, that they were very well with each other. Facial expressions, eyes, smiles, and poses spoke about it. And yet it wasn't just that, there was something else. It was only after a while that Jane realized it was Jason's hands. They were the ones creating this mood, holding her by the shoulders as if they needed nothing else in this universe. If a face could lie, hands couldn't. And now he's lying and not even particularly hiding his lies. And everything in their lives is going down the drain. Jane's gaze shifted from the photograph to a small sheet of paper. This sheet, folded several times, had fallen out of his pocket yesterday. He hadn't even noticed it in the semi-darkness of the hallway. Jason's hand had written the dates and names on the paper. He didn't have to be a very good analyst to realize that it was something like a schedule for the next few days. Here, for example, tomorrow, Tuesday, there was some PZ scheduled. Apparently it's a gym. Thursday is BAS well, that's understandable, the pool. What about it? It'll be a whole week without us showing off our perfect torsos. Friday is art gallery show. Oh, it's not even abbreviated. Must be a very important event. I just wonder when he suddenly became so interested in painting. Well, her husband leads a very busy, active life. One can only envy him. He's been going round and round, poor guy. He even has to write things down so he doesn't forget, or mix them up. The list wasn't that unusual. Jason was a very active man. He liked sports and socializing. He had a bunch of friends and interests. She always knew about it and was periodically a participant in one event or another herself. But now everything was completely different. Opposite each date was a capital letter. D, where the gymnasium is next to the pool and the gallery, the letter T. Well, it's clear they're capital letters of names. E. That's some kind of Dina or Denise. And you're probably Tammy. Poor guy. I can't believe I have to put women on the list to keep from getting confused. I mean, this could be embarrassing. He came to the meeting with the machine, and their Taneka, Jane from Compton, unhappy sheet in her fist clenched, and immediately threw it away in a heartbeat. Crumpled paper balls with a quiet clatter fell to the floor and rolled a little to the side. She dropped her head on her hands and wept bitterly. She wiped her face and stared angrily out of the window. Jane's parents were absolutely amazing. They were beautiful, smart, generous, and fun. According to Jane's grandmother, they could even claim to be the best parents in the universe if they were home a little more often. They both worked at the city hospital as doctors, performing surgeries on call around the clock, doing consultations. In general, they did all the hard work that fills the life of real doctors. By the way, it was absolutely incomprehensible how they kept their cheerfulness in the mode in which they had to work. But the fact remained. Jane didn't remember her parents being in a bad mood at all. It was only years later, when she had grown up, that she finally realized that her parents kept it up for her and, despite their endless chronic fatigue, didn't want to spoil the few hours they had together. Jane adored her parents. Even though she was always asked by adults, "Jane, when you become an adult, are you going to be a doctor like your mom and dad?" And the answer was instantly and firmly, "No, of course not." The adult who asked the question, not assuming such a reaction, inertially nodded and suddenly, realizing the unexpected answer, which was completely contrary to his understanding of the situation, began to smile stupidly and confusedly. Why some adults ventured to continue the conversation after the disconcerting answer of the daughter of the two doctors. "Because I want to see my children more than twice a week," Jane cut off, finally discouraging those wishing to continue the topic from having a deficit of communication with their parents. In everything else, Jane knew no rejection, including opportunities to find herself. She'd tried everything she could think of. In her record, there were such classes as traditional for any girl: dancing, drawing, swimming, music school, and quite unexpected classes origami and wushu. But creative, sports activities did not interest her much. Jane grew up quite a lazy girl who liked to just go with the flow, to do one thing or another, and learn exactly enough not to cause questions to herself. Parents who showed up at the complete absence of ambitions and aspirations of their only child and blamed themselves for everything here say they could not instill in the child a love of active life quickly fell behind. Jane, being a lazy person, entered the teacher training institute only thanks to the target direction, which got her father. Well, and nothing, she waved away. "I'll work these 5 years. So what if I live in peace?" Peace of mind was Jane's main focus in life. "Jane, you should have been born a wooden pillow," laughed Mary, a soulful friend who had known Jane since high school and who always told her the truth in her own eyes, would lay herself on her side, thinking of nothing. One day, a rather large and noisy group of friends, and they tore off to the sea. Just a couple of hours in the airplane. And there it was, huge and beautiful, tender and warm. When the first delight passed, came the realization that she was not ready for the season. Not that everything was bad, but it was a long way from self-confidence. The disappointment was brought on by the swimsuit. The fabric on her thighs cut into her skin far more than she would have liked. Jane, instead of looking favorable in the swimsuit, somehow ended up with smaller breasts than she had hoped for. So she decided she didn't need a tan. Besides, it was unhealthy, and she could easily do without bathing. For the rest of her vacation, she walked around with a light shawl elegantly tied around her hips and her stomach pulled in as much as possible. That evening, Jane refused to go to the restaurant with the company. For some reason, she wanted to be alone, to wander along the almost empty and unusually quiet seashore after 9 o'clock. Besides, she secretly admitted to herself that she must look extremely attractive and romantic from the outside, a lonely beauty in a wide-brimmed hat on the seashore. She slowly walked along the edge, where the sand, barely hidden by the escaping wave, was wet and pleasantly cold to her feet. She held her hat with her hand, just in case. Of course, the accessory was chic, but frankly very impractical. The slightest breeze blew up the brim, and the hat would fly away. Jane had chased a fugitive down the beach a few times before, blushing and forgetting to keep her stomach taut, probably looking disgusting. Now everything was wonderful. The light sea breeze was ruffling the thin brim of her hat, making it look mysterious. Jane gazed languidly into the distance, where the setting sun was sinking into the sea, a perfect picture. The last rays of the evening were flooding her skin, and she seemed very tanned. To make it even more perfect, she waded mid-thigh into the water. Suddenly it all disappeared. A tanned hand flashed before her eyes, and Jane collapsed into the water. Fireworks erupted in her head. Seawater rushed into her ears and mouth. Not realizing what was happening, stunned, confused, she wanted to scream, but instead she just gulped water. Jane might have become the first vacationer in history to drown in shallow water, but thankfully that didn't happen. The next second she felt strong arms beneath her, tearing her upward toward the air. She clutched convulsively at one of those saving hands and suddenly heard a soft, full of pleading voice. "Girl, dear, please let go. You've driven your nails into my hand. It hurts a lot. Let go. Honestly, I'll throw you back now." With a frightened jerk of her hands, she looked at the man who had spoken. And things got even worse than they had been. No, of course, he was not up to the role in her favorite Turkish TV series. But he was still handsome. It was silly to deny it, and she didn't want to. If she was to be rescued from the abyss of the sea, it would be by such a handsome man. He had the right features, blonde hair that was probably just burned out, gray eyes that squinted a little, and very tanned skin, on which the white teeth of his smile stood out clearly. His shoulders were broad and he moved smoothly, with a sense of power. All in all, damn near perfect. She herself, on the other hand, was probably terribly wet right now, her hair sticking to her head and face in bunches. All her light Mediterranean makeup, on which she had spent an hour and a half in the hotel, had naturally floated. And most likely her face now looked like a mask of a fallen Papuan, with horrible tentacles of eyes, which had already acquired an intriguing purple hue. In short, the image of the romantic beauty was ready. The damned handsome man continued to carry her silently in his arms, apparently without even bothering. It was very pleasant, but it was time to know the honor, especially wanted to know the final destination of their unexpected run. "Excuse me, where are you going?" "Anyway, what's going on?" she finally decided. The man was young, mid-30s, maybe even less, and looked up at him fearfully. Tired after all, noticing the droplets of sweat on his forehead. Yes, and the Savior's breathing became less even and could be heard quite clearly now. "Where to?" "To the infirmary, of course. There's a piece of bottle sticking out of your leg," the man said. Jane swept the tangled, sand-stained strands away from her face as gracefully as possible. She looked at her foot, which had been pulled up by her own scarf, and almost fainted. There was indeed a large piece of thick bottle glass sticking out of her foot. Apparently it was lodged in her foot and would not come out on its own. "So? You don't feel anything at all?" he wondered. "No, it's probably shock," said the daughter of the medics confidently, and finally really lost consciousness. She woke up on the couch, and alas, instead of the face of the beach handsome over her bent funny red head with a thick beard. "Well, are you awake?" asked the head. "I wanted to do CPR." He grinned merrily. "What's wrong with me? And where am I?" Jane asked pointless questions. "You're in the hospital," the man explained patiently. "You have a foot injury, so I'm afraid your active vacation is over. You don't have your phone with you, do you?" "Well, I thought so." "It's all right. Your knight will be back to help you." "My what?" she asked fearfully. "Knight. Well, the guy who brought you here. He's very good, by the way, I'll tell you that. First of all, it's a good 3 kilometers from here to the shoreline. And secondly, it's a good thing he didn't pull the glass out. It would have bled a lot. And stitched it up. And thirdly, he's just good, that's all." "Oh, really? I don't even know him." Jane was glad to herself that the handsome savior was not a figment of imagination or the result of sunstroke, but existed in reality. "Yeah, but that's not a problem. Then you'll meet him. Especially since he's about to show up," the doctor smirked. "Idiot. Brainless fool," Jane scolded herself, trying to cover her face as much as possible with her dried hair. "Instead of coddling, you'd better ask for a napkin to wipe your face, you scarecrow." The savior was dressed in white shorts and a light plaid shirt. Sunglasses sat on his nose, and the whole man was even more handsome than Jane remembered. Now he was quite comparable, even to her idols from Turkish melodramas. Yes, and the whole situation was terribly romantic and worthy of a play. All except for her appearance, of course. Jane sat up awkwardly and gingerly lowered her feet to the floor. Her tightly bound leg whimpered unpleasantly, and pain literally shot through her leg as it made contact with the surface. "Oh," Jane cried out, looking at the doctor pitifully. "It hurts, doesn't it?" She heard a familiar soft voice and looked at the man. He was standing in front of her and smiling, as if seeing her shaggy, with mascara smeared on her face, and a different swimsuit was the rarest happiness in his life. Jason turned out to be a local. Their family had a small house near the sea, where Jason lived with his mom. He came every day, brought flowers, oranges, ice cream, drove her around the coast in an old but serviceable car, and always wanted to carry her in his arms. They stopped in small cafes with tables facing the sea, sat under striped awnings and ate incredibly tasty cakes, or the best kebab in the world, as the owner of the establishment claimed. And judging by the taste, if he exaggerated only a little. Jane squinted fearfully at the mussels, which smelled of the sea. Jason hummed understandingly, setting a plate of steaming hinkali in front of her. "Jason, I wanted to lose weight on vacation," she wailed, taking another bite of the impossibly delicious local cuisine. "Don't make it up. You look fine as you are. And you don't need to lose any weight," Jason smiled, slipping her a scoop of ice cream. Then they sat side by side on the shore, listening to the sea, feeling that the world around them had changed forever and completely. And the reason for that change was sitting very close by. "Jane, I love you and I want you to be my wife," Jason said a week later. "What are you, crazy? We've known each other for 7 days. No, you're definitely crazy." She was as shocked and stunned as when she'd fallen into the sea. 7 days? It's almost 8. And it doesn't really matter whether it's 8 days, months, or years. We know each other, he smiled. "But I can't stay here with you. I have to go home. I have a job, a contract," she exclaimed helplessly and joyfully at the same time. It seemed to her that this whole strange, unbelievable, unthinkable situation would just be resolved now, because Jason would say, "Well, but there's no judgment. You can't do it, you can't do it. What can I do?" By instead, he was silent for a long time. Then he shook his head stubbornly and said, "Since you can't stay, then I'll go with you. I can't go without you. So will you marry me?" "Are you crazy? To go away from here, from the sea, from the sun to our kingdom of snow and mosquitoes?" She looked at Jason with happy disbelief. "You know, Jane, I love the sea very much. But I love you more," Jason said simply. "No, you're definitely not normal. And I'm just as abnormal as you are. And this whole situation is completely abnormal." "Of course I agree," Jane replied. To Jane's amazement, Jason had actually moved to her hometown. Before that, he had flown here with Jane. Somehow, in a matter of days, he had traveled to all her friends and relatives and had the full support and blessing of their parents. Jason was active, fun, assertive, and at the same time correct, witty, and impeccably tactful. Terrific man, pronounced Jane's school friend Mary. The lady was very skeptical of men, considering them suitable in principle only for procreation. She herself had married their common classmate almost immediately after school, bore him 3 boys, and said she lived with a crowd of schoolboys. "Just terrific. And what does he see in you?" Mary suddenly declared. In a way, she had insulted Jane directly. "Frankly," Mary replied. "Jane, we are quite different. You're lazy and indecisive and quiet. Oh, don't play offense on your face. Who but I will tell you the truth. And he's like a spring, like a perpetual motion machine. Come on, Jane, get up off that couch. Or you'll never catch him. And he won't carry you in his arms all your life." Jane thought a long time over her friend's words. Mary was right, of course. She and Jason were very different. And the longer they lived together, the more noticeable the difference became. She herself was lazy, there was no denying it. And it wasn't just in her lifestyle, it was in her thoughts. The problems that arose in her life, she preferred to solve in a simple and universal way. She stopped thinking about them, at least for a while. Jason was the opposite. It was as if for him there were no problems that could just seriously stump him. He just set a problem and solved it as quickly as possible. So quickly that Jane sometimes didn't even have time to fully realize the problem. He was a programmer or some kind of software specialist. In general, as the IT people said, Jane didn't know much about it at all. The main thing was that Jason was a high-end specialist. and he had no trouble finding a job. In fact, he wasn't looking for one. A couple days after he'd moved in, he was already going somewhere with bread, tea, and coffee from a huge mug. "Where are you going?" Jane asked in surprise. In her mind, a man who had changed his fate so radically needed at least 6 months to just look around, get used to his new surroundings, pick up his options. "Where to, Jane?" Jason wondered. "To work, of course. I'm a young husband, but I'm not going to sit on my wife's neck. By the way, I banged my elbow 3 times on the corner while I was shaving. Jane, your bathroom is impossibly small, and your whole apartment. Let's expand right now." She freaked out. The apartment she had inherited from her grandmother was very small indeed. Daddy called it a doll's house because of its miniaturization. She loved her dwelling and it was cozy, but of course there wasn't enough room for 2 people. It wasn't complicated or horrible. "It's just a matter of getting started," Jason said. "I've got it all figured out. Look, we're selling this little apartment. I still have about the same amount of money, so we add a loan and buy a normal, spacious 2-bedroom apartment. Anyway, we're not doing anything for Sunday. We're going to look at options." "What options?" Jane was even more frightened. "Apartment options," Jason nodded. "Why do we need a 3-bedroom? She continued to be afraid. "Jason, that's a lot of money. What would we need 3 rooms for? I mean, that's a lot of walking around all day dusting." "Where would we go?" Jason took offense. "You and I are going to be alone all the time. I'm going to get serious about expanding our family. You and I are going to have children. And about money, that's not your concern. Don't worry about anything. It's going to be fine." He did everything so quickly, decisively, no matter what the issue was: getting married and moving to another city, buying an apartment, getting a loan or a job. Jane, of course, couldn't think with the same speed, let alone do. Selling her old apartment and buying a new one was like traveling to another planet. But Jason had taken the job without delay and in earnest. A month later, they moved into a large, bright apartment with a huge loggia. Jane's first thought was, how many windows are there? What about all of us? At this point, she almost longed for her little old lady apartment with its 2 small wooden window frames, one of which had long ago become loose and jammed shut. Jane had therefore been spared the necessity of opening it and cleaning the panes inside and out, and now she was surrounded on all sides by huge glass and mirror surfaces that seemed to be screaming, "That's it, you're finished. Quickly grab a rag and wipe me down. Can't you see how dusty I am?" Despite the initial consternation, Jane did get used to the new apartment, especially as it turned out that in a large space, dust and scattered things were not as noticeable as they had been in their former tiny apartment. It was harder to get used to the normal pace of Jason's life. From Jane's point of view, her friend Mary's predictions were coming true. She was no longer able to keep up with her husband. He constantly needed to do something, go somewhere, or meet someone. And all of this he wanted to do together with her, with Svetlana. "Well, I don't like all this running and fuss. I'm different, lazy, fat," Jane thought. "Everyone, are you going to the gym tonight?" Jason said before leaving for work in the morning. "No, I'm not going tonight." Jane smiled tightly, as if going to the gym was a daily occurrence for her. In fact, the last time she'd been there had been over a month ago. Jason looked at his wife confidently and sighed. "Absolutely. Right." And she smiled even wider. I wondered what would have happened if I'd said I was going. Would he have had to cancel his meeting or whatever he had planned for today? "You've got a nerve," Jane thought as she watched the door close behind Jason. "And he's pretty sure I'm not going to the club. I'm going to go. Just not the way he thinks I should. I'll see what sport my beloved husband really plays." Jane's going to the gym again? Come on, skiing's better for her. Where is this fitness craze coming from? Why do people dislike themselves so much that they're willing to torture their muscles and ligaments with iron equipment for the sake of self-love? Jane was embarking on a slippery slope. To be honest, she didn't like herself very much. Of course, she wanted to have taut thighs, strong arms, a slim waist with barely visible relief of the abs. But God forbid she should have those notorious cubes. Only slightly, so that it was visible that she is working on the abs. She didn't have to have ribs and abs, just so that her sides didn't blend in with the waistband of her jeans or ripple when she moved. She understood the need for physical activity, recognized the role of sports in people's lives, and even liked it. That is, his sport was very much to her liking. Theoretically, for example, on television, especially when there were big sports tournaments like the Olympics. Then Jane became an athlete at heart, too sucking in her stomach, trying to eat right and walk. She gave herself her word of honor to go to the gym on Monday. However, it was not specified from Monday of what week, month, or year it would happen. The year wasn't important either. She was terrified of gyms. First of all, because of those for whom, judging by their appearance, that Monday had started years ago. They were all strikingly thin, slim, and pumped up. They made Jane and her kind look like members of a scraggly, backward branch of evolution. Embarrassed, she canceled the training, proudly left the gym, and decided to start the fight for a beautiful body, not with physical exertion, but with proper nutrition. To do this, she bought a fruit and vegetable juice at the bar, sipping the strange-tasting mixture and pretending on her face of healthy pleasure. She mentally converted the cost of the drink into the amount of whole fruits and vegetables, getting an approximate weight of several kilograms. She was finally convinced that the sports club was a pure scam, and decisively left the abode of sports. Jane simply could not bring herself to do regular exercise at home alone for a number of reasons. First, it is impossible to provide a suitable microclimate for exercise in the apartment. Secondly, it is psychologically difficult to achieve the right level of motivation alone, as psychologists say. She honestly tried to start, even bought a CD with the workouts of a famous American fitness trainer with a loud and nasty voice. The trainer was obviously meant to motivate Jane. With great difficulty doing a difficult warm-up, she heard that it was only a warm-up and the workout itself would start now. After that, the budding athlete turned off the disc and lay down to rest. Her muscles were so sore that she had to eat to regain her strength. Her body demanded a double portion of calories, which nullified all her endeavors. Jason loved the gym and the pool, going there at least twice a week. He announced that Jane would be going now too. He was like a fish in water, moving and strong, as if he were made of ready-made muscles, scurrying between the machines. He managed to chat with a lot of people, drink 2 liters of water, run a lot of kilometers on the treadmill. While Jane was huffing and puffing, painfully spinning a few hundred meters on the exercise bike, her thighs hanging disgustingly off the seat. Sweat dripped down her face, turning her already not-so-beautiful hair into icicles. Next to her, some slender blonde with long legs and a shiny ponytail was pedaling vigorously. Jane imagined how she looked against the cyclist. She tried to increase her speed to escape from the embarrassment, but the trainer kept her intentionally chained to the seat next to her neighbor. It was even worse at the pool because there were a lot more people. Covering herself with her palms and trying to move so that those around her could see only her smiling face, Jane hurriedly covered the distance between the locker rooms and the pool and hurried to get into the water. She could only swim doggy style, and that was with a Norwegian dog. Periodically, she went under. Pushing off the edge with an independent look, Jane dragged herself a few meters forward, convulsively holding her breath, quickly paddling back to the saving edge. People who had apparently been born with fins were occasionally passing by, or else how could they explain this ease of movement in the water? Jason was a great swimmer. He swung his arms relentlessly, gliding quickly and easily through the water, not down the ladder, but diving from above. I had to hand it to him neither at the gym nor in the pool. If they came together, did he leave Jane behind? He was always hanging around, keeping her in his sights, catching her glances and smiling encouragingly. At first he tried to help her, for example, to teach her to swim, but was firmly rejected. Jane honestly tried to lift her lower body to a horizontal position on the surface of the water and stay there. But apparently her 5th point was arranged differently, because it resolutely did not want to rise and pretend to be afloat. So Jane waved goodbye and hung around near the exit, enjoying the smell of chlorine or the sight of a nimble, head to toe soaked, very handsome Jason at these moments. Of course, she'd come to the gym where she and Jason had season tickets. Only Jason used it every week. Jane had to work hard to find the plastic pass card in her mad dash, trying to blend into the landscape as much as possible. She was lucky enough to hide behind a very fat lady who didn't seem to mind her size, which was enough to take up 2 exercise bikes at once. The lady was pedaling merrily. Jason entered the gym, did his exercises, spent time on the treadmill, and disappeared into the locker room. No one ever showed up. In any case, none of the ladies in attendance seemed particularly interested in Jason. Thursday, she dragged herself to Jason's workout again, now at the pool. He didn't even call me, she thought resentfully. Well, someone would be there today. Jason was already here. He was darting from one end of the pool to the other, sprinting from the edge like a dolphin. Jane, careful to stay out of the way, occasionally peeked out of the water, seeing her husband's broad shoulders and white cap. A couple of times she thought that Jason was looking in her direction, and from fright she even dived headfirst into the water. And all that sacrifice was for nothing, because he didn't see anyone again. That doesn't mean anything, Jane thought stubbornly. After all, no normal woman likes her suitor to see her sweaty and flushed or wet. So they don't go out with him. An art gallery is a different matter. That's where you get to show your best self. Let's see what Jason's preferences are now. Jane, will you go to the gallery with me on Friday? Jason asked me out of the blue. Why would I do that? She raised her eyebrows in surprise. Of course I would. I told you Billy Shepard has an exhibition. Remember my buddy? I told you about him. We met about 15 years ago when he used to come to our house to paint seascapes. He didn't have a dime, so he lived with us. As payment, he painted my mom's portrait. Great guy. So he has a solo exhibition, no more, no less. He's invited me several times. I can't not go. What a bunch of art lovers, Jane said. How could Billy ask him to go? A very convenient excuse to sneak out of the house. Jane herself considered herself an unquestionably educated and cultured person. Yet she had been born into a family where one wall of a large room was almost entirely occupied by shelves of books. Jane really read a lot of books, watched the best films in the history of cinematography, has repeatedly been in theaters, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and other famous galleries. In short, she was a person of culture. But she had her own culture, her own personal culture, if I may say so. She had her own way of looking at some issues, a little specific. Are you a cultural dissident, Jane? Jason laughed, getting to know the woman he loved better. A kind of cultural opposition. For example, Jane didn't like ballet, but she didn't like it. She couldn't help it. After going to a few performances, she was convinced that this dislike is strong and insurmountable. Jane, it's a unique art form. Jason exclaimed. It's not art, it's technique, and unchanging, like canned goods, cut off the theater, Jane. The same movements 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. The legs are disfigured, the hands are like anatomical aids, and the men are in tights. She ended with the eternal ballet question, why can't men dance in normal costumes? Why do they have to wear pantyhose and white tights? Jason laughed until he cried. And Jane told him she was never going to ballet it again. Or the opera, for that matter. What's wrong with the opera, Jason? I mean, everyone's dressed up, I guess. Doesn't it bother you when Carmen, who's 3 times the size of what's his name? Lover, you're Jose. Okay, Jane, I get it. Of all the spectacular arts, we're left with the movies. Well, that's good too, so we'll go to the movies. Jane loved movies, but one for which she didn't have to get dressed, go somewhere, stand in line, and then sit for an hour and a half, or even longer, in an uncomfortable chair with no opportunity to stretch her legs. And even better to lie down, cozily covered with a plaid. The exhibition was unexpectedly crowded. It seems that this John actually turned out to be a decent artist. Otherwise, how else to explain the numerous groups of people in front of the paintings, who looked at them with a meaningful look, nodded their heads and spoke softly to each other. Yes, he has become much stronger in composition. Certainly the color palette. Notice how well the details are worked out, and what precise control of tone. John's popularity as a painter was to Jane's advantage. At least she was able to hide between the visitors and at the same time keep in sight the broad-shouldered figure of her husband in a perfectly fitting suit. Once again, something went wrong. Women appeared around Jason all the time, and many of them were very nice. He smiled, talked, even kissed a few ladies' hands. But none of it was suspicious at all. Finally, he hugged gustily and fervently. But the object of his affection was not some pretty girl, but a short, bald-headed man with a long nose. It was the owner of the show, John, whom Jason had been friends with for years. So what if he hasn't met anyone? I leave early so I don't run into him. And he might at this very time, Jane thought stubbornly as she sat in the cab, What exactly Jason was doing at this very time, she was afraid to imagine. "You shouldn't have refused to go to the exhibition," he said when he got home. "It was a very nice event. John, it turned out, was already a very famous artist. That's probably why they had really good canapes at the buffet. So you've lost a lot." Although he suddenly pulled himself up, tensed, and spoke in a low voice. He was suspiciously quick to unbutton his shirt. "It's a good thing you didn't go, and I missed you." In general, there was no time to suspect anything for the next half an hour. But the suspicions resurfaced as soon as Jason brought up the subject of the vacation they'd been fighting about for days. Jason had been urging Jane to go to the sea, but she'd been stubborn about it. "You know what, Jane, I'll go," Jason suddenly said. "I haven't seen my mom in a long time, and I miss her. And besides, I'm sorry as hell about the vacation." "So fly," Jane said. "Of course. That's it. Why go out with or whoever, with the risk of being seen by someone they know when you can fly away for a whole week and enjoy yourself to the fullest? It all makes sense now. Everything at all." Jason did fly away, and Jane stayed behind. Jason's mom, Anne, still lived in the seaside town. Over the years, of course, Jane and Jason had visited her more than once. Jane had developed a wonderful relationship with her mother-in-law, quite different from the way the two relatives were usually pictured interacting. Anne was a mocking and agile woman who had been a music school teacher all her life, and perhaps that's why it seemed as if she was always moving to some kind of music only she could hear. "Oh, I'm so glad Jason finally has a girlfriend he likes," she said after a few minutes of getting to know Jane. "I was beginning to fear that I wouldn't live to see it." "Why?" Jane marveled. "Because my son is already 28 years old, and he has never introduced me to anyone," laughed Anne. "Can you imagine, Jane?" "Honestly, no, I can't imagine. My mother thought he was, well, he's so handsome, so strong, so clever. I mean, women must be hitting on him in droves." "So they did?" Jason's mom laughed again. "They were. One of them never did. Jason kept saying, 'Mom, it's not like that.' But honestly, I was starting to worry. Finally, Jane, I saw it," she said, and looked at the woman. It was hard to believe that a man like Jason had never had a serious crush, especially here in their seaside town, where the atmosphere was conducive to courtship and romance. His mother was probably just presenting him in a better light, or didn't know about her handsome son's relationships. "That's exactly how it works," Anne said with a smile. "It looks like you're the one he's been waiting for all these years." It was obvious that even if the stories about monster mothers-in-law were true, Anne wasn't one of them. She wasn't going to fight her son's choice, teach her about life, or pretend to be more than a mom to Jason. Even when it became clear that there would be no grandchildren, she found the strength to support her daughter-in-law wholeheartedly. "Well, Jane," she said, "I can't hide it's very sad for all of us. But we shall be hopeful. Don't give up and don't give in." She banged her fist on the table with excitement. "Don't you think it would be better for Jason to break up with me?" Jane asked suddenly, not losing her composure for a moment. Anne looked at her seriously. "Perhaps. Only I know one thing: my son loves you very much, Jane. He's happy with you. I can see it. What you've already given him is more important to him than what you can't yet." After being suspicious all night, Jane dialed her mother-in-law's number. "Anne, hello. It's me, Jane." "Jane, baby," came a cheerful voice in the receiver. "I'm so glad to hear from you. It's been so long since we've seen each other. Why didn't you and Jason come?" "Yes, well," Jane mumbled. "It didn't work out. I had a lot to do. And, you know." "Anne, can you tell me where Jason is? He's not answering his phone for some reason." "Oh, he's been weird. This time he's always driving around, running around. I mean, we haven't had a decent conversation since he got here. And yesterday he went to the barber shop. Can you imagine? I said to him, 'Why can't you get a haircut at home, son?' And he's talking to me about some very important meeting. He bought a new suit yesterday, a white shirt. It's like he didn't fly to the sea, but to a symposium." Your favorite son didn't fly to a symposium, but to a date. Jane almost burst out. "I'll tell him to call you right away." "Are you sure you're all right, Jane? You sound a little sad." Anne was visibly worried. "Noticed it at last," Jane thought. "I won't see him until tonight," Anne continued. "He said he'd be late. A friend of his is opening a new restaurant on the waterfront. When he found out Jason had flown in, he came running to his feet, saying, 'Help me, save me.' Well, you know Jason. Who could say no to help? He's out there all day installing computer programs to make them work. Well, I don't know anything about it. But Jason says the opening's coming up and they just can't keep up. I guess it's a good thing he shows up in the morning." Jason's mom laughed. "Sure is a convenient cover," Jane thought. "It'll make it easy to get home in the morning." The restaurant is called Evening Breeze. "It's not very original, of course. That's what I told the boys," Anne went on. "Jason thinks it's going to be the best place in town. Oh, I've been talking to you, Jane. It's just been so long since I've seen you. I'll be sure to tell Jason you're worried. And I'll give him the head of the sink for it. I promise you that. All right, sweethearts. Bye-bye kisses." The mother-in-law abruptly disconnected. Jane looked at the phone doubtfully, restless, active, inquisitive. Jason had taken after his mother. But the woman had another quality the son hadn't inherited. She was talkative, and like any loving mother, loved to talk about her child. And so it came to pass that, without asking hardly any questions, Jane knew where Jason was spending his vacation evenings, who he intended to spend his nights with. She would see for herself. 24 hours later, she was stepping off the plane in a familiar seaside town. She had no trouble finding out the address of the restaurant Anne had given her. Evening Breeze was indeed opening soon, and advertisements for it were broadcast among others on the airport's huge monitor. It was posted on one of the shuttle buses in front of the stop. After filling out the address, Jane sank tiredly onto the bench. "So what do we do now?" she wondered. "This is just awful. I'll get there. I'll see Jason with some hottie or other girl. So what? What's that going to change?" She pulled herself back. "I'll look him in his pretty face and spit. Maybe, if my mouth isn't too dry, I'll walk away. That's it." Jane glanced resolutely at her watch and strode toward the bus stop. A small, nimble bus took her almost to the waterfront. As soon as she stepped out of the stuffy cabin, she could smell the sea. Her eyes caught the turquoise sheen of the sea surface with pleasure. Well, of course, the Evening Breeze. What else would one call a restaurant here, she involuntarily thought. A large, brown-railed area overlooked almost the shoreline, like a small pier. It was evident that there was minor work going on everywhere, the unfinished work that would precede the big renovation. But on the terrace there were already a mixture of light tables, chairs and armchairs, cauldrons with tropical plants, the edges of a huge white awning and white tablecloths. The broad palm leaves were lightly ruffled by a barely perceptible breeze. "Would you like to have dinner?" A soft, soft voice sounded above her head. Jane dropped her bag from her hands in surprise. "I'm sorry, sir, did I startle you?" The young man said with a smile, lifting her bag from the sand. "I just thought you were hesitant to go any further." "But are you open?" Jane wondered. "Yes, we've already started working," the boy nodded. "My name is Nathan, by the way." He showed her his name tag on his chest and waiter's badge. "You see, our official opening is really only in a few days. But in fact, we are already serving our guests, and at the same time we are studying the wishes, trying to take into account and correct the defects. So what about dinner?" Jane was suddenly very hungry. She was so hungry that her stomach rumbled, and she looked fearfully at the boy. Had he heard? He must have, because he smiled slightly and made an inviting gesture toward the terrace. Jane quickly straightened her hair, tugged awkwardly at her crumpled dress, and stepped forward. "You just put me in a corner somewhere." "Okay, so I can't be seen," she mumbled to the boy's back. "Okay, I'll put you somewhere they won't find you," he smiled, glancing around. The place was really secluded, and a little off to the side in a small cubbyhole and behind a row of plants. Jason was nowhere to be seen. After a few minutes, though, she forgot why she was here. A plate of baked fish and vegetables was placed in front of her. It was so delicious that eating the tender, juicy white meat took over her senses and her mind at the same time. "Nice girl. The fish knife lies just to the left of the fork. This is wider. The one you're holding is for butter. It's blunt and won't do you any good," she said over her head. Jane flinched and dropped the wrong knife from her hand. In the doorway, slender, handsome, in a light-colored suit that looked especially great against his tanned skin, his hair carelessly laid back, Jason was looking at her with a smile. She found herself here. Jane realized that she had never felt so stupid in her life as she did at this moment. "Weren't you supposed to be here today?" Jason said suddenly. "Why here?" she wondered. "Jane, don't you recognize this place?" Jason asked. "What place?" She looked around. "This restaurant has just been built. How can I recognize it?" "What's a restaurant got to do with it?" Jason waved his hand. "I meant the place. Look around." She looked around carefully. What was there to recognize? The coast is the same everywhere, sand and water. "And you're still a romantic," Jason laughed. "I don't want to torture you because you won't figure it out until morning. Look, this is the place where we met. Remember, you were floundering like a sea naiad and I, like a young sea god, was rescuing you from the sea. Over there, see?" He pointed to a group of white buildings, which seemed quite toy-like from here. "That's where he was carrying you." Wait, Jane realized Anne told me the name of the restaurant. Does she know? Is she in on this with you? "Well, my mom played along," Jason nodded. "How could she not? I wouldn't have gotten you out here. I really wanted to have a day like this." "What kind of day?" Jane looked up, frantically remembering. Jason rolled his eyes. "Jane, you're incorrigible." He sighed. "Today is exactly 10 years to the day we met on this spot." Like a magician, he pulled a bouquet of flowers from somewhere under the table. Luckily, it was big enough for Jane to hide her shame-filled face behind it. "Jason, who are the U and D on your weekly to-do list?" she squeezed out. He looked at his wife, who had been shaking with laughter for a couple minutes. "Wiping away her tears," he said. "What makes you think the D and the T are anyone?" "Jane, the D is Dimitrov. And the T, have you seen it? You know I keep forgetting to take my allergy pills. So I marked it just in case." "God, I'm so stupid." "I'm sorry," Jane mumbled, completely destroyed. "I will, of course. Where would I go?" Jason grinned. Everyone had forgotten. "Although, to be honest, I didn't realize you were so jealous. It's flattering. Listen, Vic, the local chef, who's a terrific cook by the way, made a dessert just for you and me." Jason glanced around and waved to Zane, who nodded and left. But he returned a few minutes later with the dish in his hands, smiling triumphantly and placing it on the table. "Here, Jane, my favorite. Happy anniversary," Jason said solemnly. There was a strawberry chocolate dessert on the platter. The chef had really gone to the trouble of depicting their initials standing in a thin chocolate basket among the creamy strawberries. The dessert was a little masterpiece of pastry art. Any normal person should have frozen in rapture and then begun to cringe at how such beauty could be ruined and eaten. But apparently Jane was not quite a normal person, because at the sight of the dessert suddenly experienced a sharp and completely unexpected attack of nausea. It was all the more unexpected, considering that Jane had always been an omnivorous person with a strong stomach and an excellent appetite. She turned pale, jumped up, put her palm to her mouth, and rushed away. Jason was confused and bewildered. After waiting a few seconds, he rushed after her. This was definitely not how he had imagined his beloved woman's reaction to the meal he had prepared for them, much less the end of a romantic evening. Staggering, Jane walked out of the ladies' room. Jason was loitering on the sidelines. He ran up to her and took her hand, peering into her eyes. "What's the matter, darling? Did you get poisoned? Jesus, let's walk with you to the hospital right now." "The hospital where I dragged you with the glass in your leg. Can you walk, or can I carry you?" How sick was she? She couldn't take it anymore and laughed. "Jason, it's been 10 years. You can't carry me now." Half an hour later, they were at the hospital, where fortunately a doctor Jason knew well was on duty. Jane was quiet and even a little thinner, and she came out of the treatment room and sat quietly next to Jason. He rushed toward her. "So, did you get poisoned after all?" he asked anxiously. "I'm going to blow this stuff to smithereens. I don't know what "Wait, don't scream," Jane soothingly stroked her husband's arm. "It's not their fault in the slightest. My condition is all your fault, Jason, honey. I'm pregnant." Jason flinched and looked up at her. If there were any lingering suspicions deep inside him that disgusted him, they dissolved completely, and without a trace in the happy glow his eyes flashed with.